Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the stream. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, as I'm sure you are aware at this point. Been around for a little while. And today we're going to be looking at the new patch, so I hope everybody has brought their questions. I will ask you to hold things that you want, like an actual in-depth answer to the end of the stream. So I'm going to breeze through the multiplayer stuff. I know a lot of people are very curious about campaign, so I would like to spend a decent amount of time on that. Make sure my audio levels are pretty good here. Yeah, they look fine. So if I'm too quiet, you guys can always let me know. Let's see here. Yeah, so hold your kind of more in-depth, detailed questions until the end, after we've covered everything, because we may answer it throughout the stream. I will be taking a look briefly at chat every now and again to try and go through some of the simpler stuff, but yeah, bigger questions, we're going to hold them until the end. So the structure for this is going to be multiplayer. I'm going to quickly go through the overhaul, all the new maps and things that we've got. We've got sieges that are already in the game. I may actually preview the map today, or I may save it for later because it is tied to an event. Whatever you guys want, really, you guys can let me know. And then we'll move on to multiplayer, or single player rather. Single player has had some big strides made. There's still a long way to go, but it is much more functional, in particular with recruitment. So it's not like third age playable, but it is. You can play it. You can have some fun with it. Some of our testers, one of them in particular, is I think he had like a 50-60 turn campaign before he ran into a random issue that I can't seem to replicate. But there's not a lot of scripting and things like that. It's all very simple. But yeah, let's move on to the multiplayer side of things, and yeah, again, hold your questions down to the end there. So one of the biggest things, and I think it's been discussed on a couple of other streams previous, I think UMAD has talked about it a little bit as well, is that we have done a really big overhaul to just stat distribution and things like that. And that was done quite some time ago, and I have added to it since then. So there will be some new information in here as well. One of the biggest things is that we've really taken a lot of time to make certain things more weighty. So racials, weight classes, so heavy, medium, light, skirmish, etc., etc. Tier role templates, keywords, which you're going to see here, and I'll discuss what some of them mean. They've all been added, and they all do or mean something to create a lot more diversity amongst even units that are very similar. So 2 light infantry spear units may behave in subtle or sometimes much more like overt ways that are different, depending on faction and racial bonuses and a bunch of other things like that. We've also changed the way that like stat spreads are kind of distributed throughout the mod, in terms of weapon types as well. Most of the weapons that are, say, armor piercing, that's a good example, have been moved to the medium and the light tier. So you do still have these really strong AP weapons. Two-handed axes are now no longer a guaranteed thing. We do have a few exceptions to that rule. But maces and other AP weapons like that are largely the province of lighter infantry units, like, say, the Stalkers of Morgoth here, and another good example would be the Seafarers of Hithlam. Both light units, and that helps, I think, give light units a little bit more of a place in there. They've also got some really strong terrain bonuses, and we'll talk about that in a second. Makes them really good like junglers and like skirmishers and like guerrilla units. And they can certainly outfight even stronger heavy infantry when fighting in the right kind of terrain. Forest, for example, is one of the places where heavy units, especially polearms, will really struggle to keep up with some of these lighter troops, both in terms of speed, but also in terms of just raw bonuses that they're able to bring to bear. We do have a new keyword system. It's not that new. I think it is currently live, but it's really more descriptive rather than like additive. But in this case, it is a little bit different. So scout and screen are going to mean 2 different things. Scout just means that this is a unit that's got multiple terrain bonuses, usually 2 and above. And terrain bonuses as well, we've revisited those, and you're going to see a lot stronger terrain bonuses that can make much more of an impact. And the purpose of that is to, one, give light infantry a place in the mod. In some of the previous iterations, they've kind of just been window dressing a little bit, and very, very vulnerable to missiles, of which there was quite a lot in the mod. There still is, but we've actually reined that in as well, but we'll talk about that in a second. So that's what Scout does. Screen is, I believe it gives them an additional bonus in a particular terrain type. I believe it's Forest. And it also makes them a little bit faster. So you can have them out in front of your army, use them to quickly outflank other units, things like that. The sort of stuff that you'd expect from a light infantry unit. Moving on now, we've also got some other things in here like Paragon. I'm not sure why it says Paragon Force. Should be Paragon All. Basically what Paragon means, speaking of terrain bonuses, is that it doesn't take any penalties that you'd expect. Normally a heavy infantry unit like this would be like -2, -3 in the woods. But Paragon units fight at their tip-top all the time, but they don't get any bonuses, so it just zeroes out. You're going to find that on basically all legendary companies and bodyguards as well. Moving on over here, we have Hatred. So we've added a lot of new mount types into the mod. And Hatred is usually directed, actually it's exclusively directed at different kinds of mount types. So Hatred Balrogs. Balrogs are mechanically an elephant in the mod. That's how they can have the small numbers in the area attacks and things like that. These guys are going to be particularly good at fighting them, and that's going to include both regular Balrogs, and as you'll see, we've added some character Balrogs as well. It's going to encompass both of them. I think that about does it for the keyword stuff. There's some other things too. Some of them are a little bit more transparent about what they are, others are not so much. So we go over to Nan Dungortheb. If you look here, the Urish Abomination, he's got Eldritch. Basically means that he takes penalties in the woods, but he's also got extra armor. I think it means AP attack, or they cause fear. Yeah, they would cause fear. That's what Eldritch does. And it adds a little bit of lore, a little bit of flavor text, because the Urish Abomination is meant to be a nameless thing. So Eldritch, it's something that's been around for forever. It's ancient. It's a terrifying being from, beyond the stars, essentially. Terrain bonuses we've talked about. Keywords, yes. Now there is something new that I want to talk to you guys about, and it plays more to the detachment system that we have. So detachments, half-strength units in the mod, for the most part, they do something different. These guys, for example, have harassment javelins, so longer range, good at picking apart lighter skirmishers and just inflicting light damage over time. They're usually half strength, and they cost you about half of what the regular unit will, give or take some. Sometimes they have extra traits that cost a little bit more. First Companies, or FCs for short, is a new concept that we've introduced into the mod. They are going to be a little bit different, well, actually distinct from legendary companies, for example, in the sense that legendary companies are often a mirror of an existing unit, the same way that first companies are. But legendary companies are usually an upgrade in some way, or they bring a tool to the box of the faction that didn't have it before. So originally, maybe not so much now, they have a little bit more breadth to their infantry, but not as much. The Curse of Aquilonde were meant to give Feanor an infantry option to sort of enable that playstyle, something that meshes well with the Defenders of Aguilon, but still kind of leans into, in some ways, that like Feanor heavy armor sort of thing. That's what legendary companies do. They're like an upgraded version of an existing unit that has some sort of like lore flavor behind them, the Curse of Aquilonde. I'm sure you can guess what that's all about. First companies are different. They are mid-tier, they are never kind of high-tier, whereas LCs are always high-tier. And there's some kind of side grade. So if we look and compare the stats between these two here, why don't we go and take a look at them on the field so you can see what they look like. But they're going to be distinctly a side grade in some way, and they are going to have more, a little bit more meat in the unit in terms of extra models, but you will pay extra for them. So we'll take a look at these here. So they've got very low melee defense, quite typical for heavy infantry, and especially so for Feanor because they are extra heavy. And they've got really, really high shield value and super high armor as well. You got 123 men in the unit there. Whereas, we still need their picture. Whereas these guys, the spread is different. They've got a bit higher base armor, but they can't upgrade. They can't upgrade their attack. They can't upgrade their defense. Whereas the base model, the Himring Footmen, can do both of those things. They got a little bit higher melee defense, which is significant because it does help them out a lot against armor piercing. So melee defense is the big counter to armor piercing damage, which is one of the main weaknesses, as you would expect, of heavy infantry. Footmen of Himring only have a little bit, and they've got a bit of a higher shield, but these guys have both more numbers and a higher sort of defensive value. They've also got some additional traits. I think they've got an Inspire, a little bit of extra damage and things like that, but it's still very much a side grade, especially in terms of price. Look at the difference there, 1040 versus 695, although this gap does narrow once you start to upgrade the Footmen of Himring, so it's a bit of a choice there between you want numbers, you want something that can act like an anchor to your army or to your battle line. First companies are going to be a really good way of doing that. And for some other factions like Nan Dungorthab, it does actually offer them one of the few means of Inspire outside of bodyguards. And they've got some pretty easy to break infantry, so that can actually be really, really significant, especially in certain contexts like sieges. Maybe not so much in a field battle, though it certainly does have its place. But in the grindy, kind of high damage, lots of morale shocks flying your way environment of sieges and like choke points and things like that, first companies can be really, really helpful. Or as I said, for anchoring your line. So let's go back there to the custom screen, and that's kind of the big thing, is that we're still ironing out the implementation of it, but they are not meant to replace anything. They're meant to be a little bit of a step to the side in certain situations where you feel it could be relevant. And that was added as part of an ongoing attempt to kind of bring us back to our roots as an infantry-focused mod. Let's check the chat here. Hello, Mr. Gervais. Welcome, welcome. But yeah, so that's an ongoing attempt to kind of bring us back to being more of an infantry-focused mod. And let me clarify, by infantry-focused, I mean that infantry is going to be by far the most diverse and numerous parts of your army for factions that don't really specialize in cavalry, monsters, and things like that. Not that they're necessarily the most powerful in every situation, but you are going to be relying very, very heavily on your infantry, both campaign and multiplayer. And we're trying to bring it back to that. So, pursuant to that, we've also had a cavalry and a skirmisher rollback in a lot of factions who don't specialize in cavalry or skirmishers. So, probably the hardest hit faction would be the Haladin, so the Waltriders and the Mounted Mordrot, two units that have, for pretty much ever, actually, I think since they were implemented, had a bow and a set of javelins. They've lost those. Darawarda have lost those, and I think that's mostly it for this particular faction. They've also tightened up these caps a little bit here as well. So chariots, for non-elephant factions, you're going to see them capped at 1. Most cavalry are going to be capped at between 2 and 3. You'll probably see these guys are going to be a little bit higher because their elites basically are their cavalry, whereas everything else is a mid-tier unit. But a lot of factions like Valinor, for example, these guys used to be able to be brought in numbers. Now you've only got 2. And quite a lot of units have gotten that treatment. I believe Finarfin, their swordsmen have lost their precursor. Throne weapon, Haladin. Oops, no, that's a new faction. We'll talk about them in a second. Sorry, I don't mean to tease you too much. Haladin, yeah, they lost those 3 units because basically almost every Haladin unit had a missile, which was a little bit excessive. And you're going to find that that plays out across basically everything. So again, trying to bring us back to that infantry focus, especially in multiplayer where you're going to be relying very, very heavily on your infantry to make up your numbers, to take and hold ground, to like push through choke points. But cavalry will still be very useful. They're quite strong at the moment, so you do still want to bring them, but you won't be able to flood the field with them to the same extent that you used to be able to. That being said, we made deliberate efforts to not be overly conservative with these caps because we don't want to railroad you too much. Like, we want to have that, you know, beautiful breadth and diversity of compositions. Don't want people to only have like one or maybe two viable comps in multiplayer, especially in a competitive format. Casually do whatever you want. It's totally fine. Enjoy the chaos. But yeah, shooting for that like 3, 4, maybe even more kind of sweet spot. You've got a lot of moving parts in all of the armies, especially in a team where you're combining different strengths and weaknesses. So it should be okay, but it is something that we have thought about. Just wanted to throw that out there for everybody. We do have a ton of new spells that also specialize in utility. Utility has been very much the focus of this patch. There's a lot of things that don't necessarily do damage, but they do have some other secondary effect that can be really, really useful. Let's see if I can remember a few of them off the top of my head. Let's see. I know that Valinor has one. This one's a little bit weird. I'll maybe do that one after. Let me just see here. Where are they? Yes. This one I think might still have a damage component to it, but I'm going to show you kind of what I mean. Oh, that's actually the wrong thing. Mariners of Erendil got a new model. Surprise, surprise. But this is a good example of the kind of thing that we're trying to focus on, and kind of where my head's at, I guess, in terms of designing things. So it's going to have its big old flashy projectile, and it might still have a damage component tied to it. That is something I was experimenting with, but I might have just forgot to turn off. Yeah, so it is still kind of killing people, but you can see that basically the job of this is to be very flashy and to just kind of stop this unit from moving. So this is a stagger effect. It's what happens with the projectile is it shatters, and then it applies a stagger effect again and again and again for a time limit that I specify, and it just stops this unit from being able to move. There's all kinds of things that can be useful for this. You're making targets for artillery, for your teammates. You're stopping someone's advanced dead in its tracks. You're delaying them. Maybe you have reinforcements on the way, and you need to buy a few minutes of time. For Phalos, in particular, it creates space for their skirmishers to like focus down this unit. You can stop other units from firing if there's a particularly deadly skirmisher, say the Dorniath AP bowmen, and they're focusing down one of your allies' elephants. You can train this unit onto them, and it's just going to stun them and give that unit a little bit of breathing space, whether it's to finish what it's doing, mop up a unit, or to just get out of range so it can't be targeted any longer. So this is the kind of thing that we're really kind of leading into. And let me show you some other things as well. We do have, and I want everyone to bear in mind that a lot of stuff in the build right now is very temporary. We are borrowing models from, I have a couple from Hyrule Total War. Those are temporary while we rig up our own models. One of them I actually really like because it's creative and just disgusting. So I'm trying to get some permissions for that, but mostly we have them in the game right now so we can test concepts and like have something tangible that we can really work with. So if you're one of the Hyrule developers and I haven't had a chance to get in touch with you yet to ask you for permission, please note that it is temporary. It's just, we're just trying to test some stuff out, and the work is beautiful anyway. So yeah, if you guys haven't heard of Hyrule Total War, recommend you go and check it out. Really, really innovative. But let's take a whole bunch of these. We're gonna put these guys behind you. This is the Zaganul Abominations. And this, I think people will either really hate this or they're gonna find it immensely cool and very satisfying. I personally am a huge fan of this. I was testing out just trying stuff out in their mod, and I noticed this unit. Oh yeah, it's got a bit of a radius, and we'll explain why that's important in a second here. And I saw this, and I was like, I don't know what it does or why, but it's the coolest thing ever. So I need to integrate it somehow. So I'm just gonna show you what it does. It also does have a smoke screen. This is mostly for visual effect. It may do more later, but it is to kind of obscure things. I will be turning banners off by default so that effects like this will have kind of more to do. So if we look at this here, we're actually trying to shoot at these guys in behind them. And there's no kind of overspray. You can see that there's little blood puffs right here above these guys. That is because, and you noticed it probably when these guys were right next to them, they have a very, very high radius. This little elephant here, it literally does nothing other than stand in front of things, especially for light armored factions like this, and it soaks up a ton of damage. This can be artillery, this can be thrown weapons, this can be bows, whatever it happens to be. You can see there's sort of like almost an invisible force field here. The idea here is that they're so tall and bulky and just hideously mutated. It's another one of the, what do you call them? The nameless things. That's why it's so like weird and eldritch and Sithonian almost. That's another one of the nameless things with just a form so horribly mutated and far gone from anything that in Iluvatar's creation elsewhere that it just doesn't really feel pain. So the basic idea here is that these have really, really high armor, extremely high armor. So only AP and like artillery is going to get through this, but they actually have very, very low hit point pools. Currently it's 5. That may change in the future. And so they're there to soak up damage. Occasionally things will get through because it is basically an RNG like dice roll. So things will get through. They do get worn down over time, but that's the whole point of this. You stand it in front of your army or in front of a unit that you don't want to get shot, and it's there to body block, which is neat. I don't know if I've seen that kind of thing anywhere else. And if it does turn out well, and so far it's been pretty good. We've got like 4 or 5 units of archers here, but all training onto the same unit of light infantry. It's not doing anything, right? Very, very little casualties. It is an oval shape, so if we were to move these guys on top of here, you'd see it for sure. So it is an oval shape, so there are kind of gaps in the armor. It's not perfect, it's not impenetrable. You can see that little oval there, and then this one's going to overlap. So there's like little corridors here where these guys can still get shot. Okay, they get shot a lot, taking a lot more casualties. So I'm going to move them back here, and they should be okay. Take a lot less. So that's one of the... That's just to give you an idea of kind of what we're trying to... Like the design headspace, I guess, that we're in. When trying to think of new additions for the mod and things that can be useful. Obviously, this is going to be multiplayer only. Because the AI would have no idea what to do with this, and it would just be a complete nightmare. So you will not see these recruited on the campaign map for Nandun Gortheb by the AI. It's just not going to happen. They don't know how to. They won't know how to use it. It would just be a nightmare and just weird. Yeah. What else do I have here? We have some new projectile effects, really focusing on readability. Let me show you one of them for these guys here. The Heralds of Manwë, an underutilized unit, I think. I did find some really cool effects. I think these ones actually come from Hyrule Total War as well. And I'll show you what it looks like. It's more of a lightning effect. Let's see. Let's find some Balrogs, because that's what they're good at killing. And this is another one of those like highly specialized projectiles. I don't think too many people have played with them because they're not all that great. But their job is to hunt down elephants. So they've got a single shot projectile that's tossed by the rider on the back. Doesn't do any area effect damage, but it does do high single target damage. And they are able to, fly. It's one of the few flying units we have in the mod. Again, flying and Medieval 2 is super janky, but there is a baseline level of jank I think that we're all willing to accept playing Medieval 2. So you've got that little lightning effect there. Just fly them around a little bit. Do it 6 times. Kind of see what they can do. There we go. I probably have to turn up the range for the effect so you can see it at a greater distance, but they are still tossing. You can see that it does quite a lot of damage there. That last little shot was able to whittle these guys down. They do have to get relatively close. I think it's within bow shot, and they don't have crazy armor. They got 14 armor and a decent amount of HP, but they're very small model counts. So they can be destroyed that way. That's another good example. I think the Maw has a really cool acid effect now that makes a lot more sense. So this guy would shoot generic fireballs before. Now he's got something a little bit more acidy because it's like his the custom kind of fluff that I made for the Hungering Maw is that it's a spider that like vomits its acidic juices onto things and then eats them. It's just its sort of preference for hunting. Like some kind of ant, I think, that does that as a means of defense, but I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. It's a little less green than what I wanted it to be, but yeah, I can tint that a little bit more. It looked a bit greener when I was playing with this earlier, but it will also leave kind of that corrosive bile on the ground, and when things walk over it, then it will damage them. So I can get one more shot off here before he goes. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, these guys are gonna. Oh no, they'd have to walk over the little fiery bits, and then some of them are gonna walk over and they'll get toasted. So it's a little bit more obvious what's happening. Previously we didn't have this lingering fire effect on the ground. Things would just walk over and they would just die. But now you've got that clarity. You know that if you walk into here, you'll die. And that's a big theme of this patch as well, is visual clarity, so that you can, there's a lot of very powerful effects on the field. You want to be able to quickly identify what's going on and where, so that you can put a stop to it or get out of the way, things like that. I'm going to show you, I think, one more that's really cool. And then we'll move on from that. We do have, Sauron has some new visuals for his projectile, which are very cool. This has been reworked as well. And you're going to find this is true with the Glaurung faction, which, oh, spoiler alert, yeah, we have a Glaurung faction. I'm going to show them off in a minute here. You will find that blowing up your own troops is going to be the theme for quite a few evil factions. Toland Gowrhoth will do it. They'll do it with Ash Priests as well. I haven't finished their projectile, but they are going to have a lot of friendly fire stuff, and you'll find that with Glaurung, in addition to Sauron and his minions. And that's just a representation of kind of the cold, calculating nature of those beings and their willingness to sacrifice their own troops to achieve goals. So the point of this is to be able to trade. This is a much more expensive unit. You can see it costs 1,100 here. This is a first company. We're just going to throw these guys at them. We're going to move Sauron forward. I'll show you kind of how that looks. How effective is the projectile against non-Balrogs? It's basically pointless against anything that's not a Balrog. There's not enough ammo and there's not enough volume of fire to really threaten anything important like a bodyguard or whatever with that particular projectile. Especially things that have a shield value that are getting that extra bonus. Elephants don't get that. Let's let Sauron do his thing now. It's got a little shadow ball here. And it's going to fall. And if it hits the ground, you get this little green effect. And that's from Zelda Total War as well. They've got some really cool stuff there. But let's see if he'll actually split his projectile here, because that's what we want him to do. It's like a two-stage projectile. So there we go. Is it going to... There you go. So now it's going to shoot upwards. You have to be very close to do this. And you're going to cook everybody. Sauron doesn't care from where the blood flows, only that it does. And this is going to be a theme for quite a lot of things. The new Uruloki projectile, it does something very, very similar. It's got an area of effect as well, and it will like split immediately and then just shower an area in fire, whereas the regular Uruloki don't do that quite as much. There you go. One more. Beautiful. And then once that's done, you throw Sauron in there. The big difference here is, one, you pay a cost for using this very powerful projectile, and that's the trade-off for having it be a little bit more reliable. And you do have to be like closer to the front lines. I don't remember how far away it is. I think it's like 100 meters. But that does put you within range of javelin units, especially hunter javelins, whose job is to hunt down elephants, just like Sauron here, and put them in the dirt. So you have to expose yourself to counterplay in order to do it, and you will hit your own troops, and that's kind of the trade-off for how devastatingly destructive, obviously, this can be. And if you're not careful, or if you're very unlucky, because this will leave a small burning effect similar to the maw that I just showed you. If you're not careful and you're unlucky, Sauron will walk over it and he'll toast himself. So high risk, high reward, but if you did that to a bodyguard or you did that at the right time and things were already starting to waver, you could cause a mass rout. So you can do a lot of damage with this, but you do damage to yourself in return. And there's going to be quite a few units that work that way. Who else has? We've shown you the heralds and things like that. So let's talk about some of the new factions that we've got. What do I have first on my docket here? I will reiterate that, I know I talked about this before, but I want to get it out there again. Many of the models are currently just stand-ins so that we can test playstyles, right? A lot of things are going to get replaced and reworked before release. But if you guys particularly like something, or if you really don't like something, this would be a great time to say it, or to just pop into our Discord and be like, hey, I was on the stream, here's something I really liked, I hope that maybe you can take this into consideration, and, you know, you could change X, Y, and Z, because, you know, here's some things that I don't like. That's totally fine. We love that kind of respectful discourse. But the first faction I want to show you is the Brood of Glaurung. Glaurung is a faction that has a lot of emphasis on mobility, so they have a ton of chariots, which are also an elephant. They've got dragons, of course they've got dragons, and they've got Glaurung himself, Glaurung the Golden, the Worm of Ruin. But what they don't have is a lot of very reliable siege weapons. And we do borrow a lot from this. Again, we're just trying to test things out. And I will point out those things as well. Like this guy here, he's from Elder Scrolls, and he's going to be temporary. We have Castellan working on some new models and stuff. I have a Glaurung, the Golden model, that needs to be rigged, so we're just using one temporarily from Zelda. This one, obviously, we've had for ages. That's from Botet. That's from a mod made by Already Dead. That one's from Botet as well, along with the chariots. So, again, temporary. But let's show you the faction in all their glory on the field. And I will explain kind of everything that they do, and we'll have some replays for these guys in the near future as well, so you'll be able to see lots. Trolls, it might be okay against trolls, that particular projectile. There's probably better ways to kill trolls, and they're relatively quick, so they'll almost always be in melee pretty quickly. But yeah, theoretically they could be useful against trolls. It would take a little bit longer than other things like high damage infantry, AP infantry, javelins, and things like that. But yes, that is something that could work. Let's go ahead and separate these guys out. Got infantry. Oh, that's weird. Okay, infantry is there. We'll have some skirmishers over here. Chariots, oops, and cavalry will be here. And I'll discuss them all as we go through. And then finally, Hithlam's. And then this weirdo needs some artillery pieces as well. So, as I said, Glaurung is a faction that focuses a lot on shock and mobility. They don't have crazy good training on pretty much all of their infantry. Their infantry is better than Nan's, who's another elephant faction, but certainly not as good as, say, Angband or even some of the Toll and Gautrhof elites. I think a lot of these units would fall flat. That being said, Sycophants, again, temporary model. They are relentless infantry now. They used to have a projectile, but there's a lot of changes coming to Glaurung in this new patch, or this newest iteration of the patch, and it kind of became necessary to remove it. It was too strong. But they are relentless infantry, so this is one of the actually big, scary, heavy-hitting units that you can bring. A lot of armor, a lot of defense. It says that they're effective against armor. I don't know if that's the case with their primary weapon. I'll have to look into that, but I don't think they're supposed to be effective against armor. They don't have an armor-piercing weapon type, so that'll probably change. Again, temporary stuff. But good armor, good defense, definitely on tier with a lot of Elven units. Yeah, that's kind of what they're there for, is to mix things up. Tyrants of the Golden Worm, it's the only bodyguard unit that Glaurung generally has. Glaurung is quite low on morale buffing abilities, and they do shift them onto units that are a bit different. There's a Caraccio standard, or the equivalent of, in the faction that really does buff morale, and the unit that pushes it is lock morale, so it's like a constant anchor. One of the only units we generally tend to have inspire units that aren't lock morale, because it's crazy to have that for guaranteed forever. But Glaurung does kind of break that rule a little bit. These guys don't have it, but if you have your general in it, they're going to inspire anyway. They are armed with maces, so they can really mess things up in melee. Pretty decent attack, like 14 is quite high, especially upgraded. Bodyguards upgrade for cheaper, so that is something that can be really scary. So we can get a good look there. You got those kind of skull helmets that a lot of the Glaurung units are going to use. Next, we get into the Worm Cult units, which are the mid-tiers for the faction. I tried to do a little bit of a flame metal texture here. I personally think it's kind of cool and unique, but I think that the palette overall maybe needs to change, and we are looking at redoing the Glaurung Worm Cult tier with the help of Castellan and Magmar, who's done a lot of cool stuff for us. But these guys are lock morale. They are not armor piercing, but they are a really nice trading unit. Obviously, they've got very high attack and charge characteristics, but are quite low on armor, only clocking in about medium tier, which is going to be the case for most of the Glaurung army. But they are also lock morale, which is super helpful. So a fantastic trading unit, one that I think gets used pretty frequently. Here we have the Worm Cult Acolyte First Company. These guys are not your traditional spear unit. They don't have the spear charge reflection traits, which is different from the regular one over here. The guys who are armored in orange, my beautiful little pumpkin men. But they do have some really high charge values. You can't quite see it. Do have really high charge values, so you can get some good value off of them, especially as a shock infantry unit, which does play a little bit more into Glaurung's playstyle. But they don't have charge reflection, so cavalry charging into the front of them can actually really hurt them for very little cost to that cavalry in return. Over here, you have the bog standard Worm Cult Acolyte unit. These guys used to have a precursor weapon, but they no longer do. Again, part of that kind of reevaluation that we've been doing of skirmishers in general. If you need something to hold its ground and just kind of get in the way, this is a really good unit for that. Great for tying things down. They do have anti-cavalry bonuses, so they can be very dangerous against light and medium cavalry quite quickly, and heavy cavalry over time. Relatively expensive, and that's going to be the case for, I think, most of the Glaurung faction, as I'm sure you've seen as we go through. Like, these guys are like almost 700. These guys are 1,000, and even their basic spearman here is going to be almost 700 as well. And that's because I want to push you to rely a little bit more on your elephants, obviously, your chariots and so forth. Worm Cult Acolyte Detachment, so a half cost unit here, give or take a little bit. We probably need to go back and fix that price there. But they do have harassment javelins before they use their spears in combat, which can make them really nice for picking on enemy skirmishers and grinding things down over time. Them being harassment javelins means that they are armor piercing, but they have very low damage. So if you have something that's engaged with your elephants, you can be fairly sure that you can throw these guys, into them, and their projectiles are not going to hurt their elephants, but they are more likely to hurt the things below them because the elephants are quite heavily armored. They do have some kind of standard ground units here, great for grinding things out, especially in sieges. These are Worm Cult Bane Guard, and they are halberds. One of the cheaper units there for sure. Nice to combine with the Worm Cult Spearmen if you needed them to hold ground in a siege, or if you were fighting some kind of delaying action, or just to act as an anvil to your big scary monsters and other things like that. Over here, these guys are a little bit different. So, as I'm sure many of you will know at this point, we have been using EOP for quite a while, and we do have Berserkers as a unit, like the Rome 1 Berserkers that many people are so fond of. Normally, our Berserkers are multiple HP and incredibly small. We're talking like 20 to 35 units per unit, or models per unit. But these guys are different. They are 1 HP, and they have quite low armor, as many Berserkers do. They're a little bit slower, but you can bring them in numbers. And the reason this is significant is because, one, Berserking is tied to two things. You need to get a charge off, and you need to have pretty good morale while you do it. You can actually bust people out of Berserking stance and bring them back to their normal unit, kind of characteristics, whatever, by inflicting shocks on them. And we have a lot of things that do that. Poison, just taking a lot of damage very quickly, which a 1 HP light infantryman with only a few shield is very likely to do. So the big counter to these guys is volume of fire and morale shocks. Whereas other berserkers, think of it as like, I don't know, people out there play 40k, but things drop below a certain amount of starting strength in a certain period of time, then you'll get shocks. Whereas other berserkers are not doing that as much. Some of them have like decent missile defenses, just like, you know, bare-chested bravado, essentially, keeping them alive, but also multiple HP, so they don't really lose starting strength. They don't lose models as quickly, but these guys will. So they are more prone to dropping out of berserking stance, which is the trade-off for them being so numerous and relatively cheap, especially relative to other berserkers, but still quite expensive at 850. I think that rounds out their infantry. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bowmen here. These are the Worm-Cult Bowmen, and they are armed with poison arrows. The reason for this is that Glaurung does have access to a decent amount of fear effects. I believe the Golden Worm Spawn, Glaurung, Sky Darkeners, and the Dread Bone Rack, which we'll talk about in a little bit, all cause fear. A lot of these chariots, especially with rear charges, can cause morale shocks by having things, again, drop below starting strength in a certain period of time very quickly. A lot of models die. I think it's in like a 5 or something second window around that. And that a morale shock happens. And this is to help kind of push people over the edge. So it's to synergize with those fear-causing parts of the roster. Not so much for the dealing of damage. There's only 120 of them. They are fairly expensive at 700, so you're not going to be bringing these guys, you know, in huge numbers to skirmish unless, you know, maybe you need to in a siege or something. This is for applying a debuff. That's basically what they are. They're a delivery system for a ranged fear. They are quite fragile. No shields, very little melee defense, and only medium armor. Let's move on to cavalry. So first, we have the Worm-Cult Mongrels. Another one of those kind of weird units, I guess, that breaks the mold in certain ways. They have a little bit of shield from like the scaly hide of the dragons they're on. That's just to represent that, even though they don't have a physical shield on their model. They have okay defense skill, armor, decent enough attack and charge, but it's still pretty middling. These are a melee cavalry equivalent. They do have multiple HP, and there are quite a lot of them that you can bring in a unit, which at a glance you'd look at that and be like, wow, that's kind of wild. Like, maybe that's a little bit too strong. They are very fragile because of their very low defense. Think of them kind of like as almost a berserker type unit. Lots of damage, decent enough shock damage, and they also scare horses. So you can crowd them around like one unit of, say, horses and apply stacking fear debuffs, because that's how fear works. I think it stacks like up to a total of like -8, and each one does like 2 or 3 or something like that. So if you have multiple units of these and they're jumping on elite cavalry, there is a decent chance, especially if they're surrounded and taking casualties, that they can run away. So playing into that fear side of things again. They're also a nice little delaying thing, a good little body blocker, kind of meat shield for some of your more fragile chariot units. But also quite expensive, $725. Let's move on to the Threshers. So not a lot of visual diversity between the 3 chariots at the moment. Again, temporary. These are just here. We borrowed these from Botet to test some stuff out. But I believe Castellan does have plans to, and like sketches and things like that for what he would like to do with these. So we'll see if that happens in the future. Otherwise, we may just remake it as something else. But yeah, so if you're curious how you're going to tell them apart, hopefully by release we'll have all of our ducks in a row for that, and you'll be able to have some more visual diversity here. But first we have the Threshers. This is a melee chariot. It's very, very bad against horsemen. If horses get on top of these, they can actually do quite a lot of damage to them. I have made some big changes to the radius of these various units as well, so they are a lot easier to shoot, and they are easier to hit in combat because they were actually overperforming against cavalry, despite the fact that they had like -10 or something against horsemen. But yeah, brutal charge. Obviously lots of attack there, and these things charging into the flank or the rear can do a lot of damage very, very quickly, something you gotta be absolutely terrified of. They are currently capped, I believe, at 1. It might be 2 again, after I made some changes just to kind of see where that goes, but we'll see what that ends up being for release. Next we have the Bloodlighters. These are going to be harassment javelins, so longer range, more ammunition, but less overall damage. Again, this is something you can use to support your elephants, smash elephants into things, and be very, very confident that, you know, your 30, 40 armor elephants are not going to take damage from a 4 damage missile attack, even if it cuts it by half down to 20. Yeah, it's about the same chance, I think, either way. So yeah, that's what they're for. They're a little supporting chariot. I think they have a bit less HP. Yeah, they've got 1 less HP, and that should be true for the Scourges as well. So Wormcoiled Scourges, just a bow, cavalry unit, a little bit of light harassment. Can be really annoying. The nature of elephants is that, you know, you give them, say, 2 ammunition, but they have multiple riders, and then each one of those riders is going to be able to shoot once. So if these guys had, you know, 2 ammunition, they would in fact have 8, because they have 4 riders armed with missile weapons. So whatever they have right now, basically quadruple it. They can fire for pretty much ever. And when they're done, you can just pile them in, create a lot of like pressure and like local superiority, and you can cause some routes with them too, especially if they're overrunning enemy positions that are already pressed hard by some of the other elements of your army. So you can see a lot of mobility, lots of holding units, lots of utility things, some debuffs that they can use to synergize with the rest of them. And let's take a look at the big guys. Speaking of big guys, this again, we borrowed this temporarily from Zelda Total War. I have a model for this. It just needs to be cleaned up in Blender and rigged, and I'll probably put up a preview for that maybe after this this stream. But Glaurung, super interesting. You've probably noticed so far that there's not a lot of like siege weaponry, and especially once we get into here, like obviously they've got no trebuchets, no catapults. Like this is an anti-infantry weapon, and this is, you just push it around and it causes fear basically, and inspires your nearby troops. So Glaurung is your siege weapon. He's got a spell or a breath weapon that I've called Sundering Ember, and I'll show you it actually. Oh, I might have broken this projectile, so I might not be able to show you it right now. For some reason, it doesn't want to play nice. But the purpose of this is to deal area damage. It will knock a lot of people over, and it will stagger them, which is a great thing for, say, using these Uroloki over here, or these Sky Darkeners to smash into an enemy position. So if you've got, you know, someone who's all boxed up, they've got a ton of like halberds, you spit this at them, it's going to kill some people, usually in the middle of the unit. That's where the AI tends to target, and it will knock over a lot more people, just sweep them off their feet, which is an excellent opportunity for you to charge in here and to disrupt that braced bonus that a lot of polearms and spearmen will have. That can be very deadly against elephants like this. And then you just smash in there, and while they're getting up, you can cause a ton of damage and a lot of havoc. The other thing that it's very good for, as you probably guessed, is that he is a siege weapon. Sundering Ember, we do have a siege overhaul that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the stream that's coming down the pipe. He is their trebuchet, essentially, but he's like a close-range trebuchet. You're not going to be firing Glaurung across the map the way you would with an engine that, you know, throws 30-kilogram projectiles like 1,000 meters or whatever that meme is about trebuchets. He's going to have to get close, which means he'll have to expose himself to fire on the walls, or he'll have to also not die on the way in, which is hard for him to do because he's extremely tanky, 45 armor. But it will incinerate anything that it touches that is a siege weapon. So you need to have him immediately blow up a wall. Maybe there's like a general's bodyguard, someone's being careless, and Glaurung somehow sneaks up to him, even though he's a giant golden walking bastion of blasphemy, and he spits into that wall. It's going to immediately collapse, and anybody on top of it is going to die. He is a shock and terror weapon who is excellent at cracking sieges and blowing up walls. That being said, he has very limited ammunition, and that's going to be the theme of our siege thing overall, siege overhaul, if you want to call it that. Is that you are going to have to make choices. You're going to have very powerful tools at your disposal, and that's kind of what I've opted for, is to give you very powerful, very impactful things that have like immediate feedback, but you can only play that card once or twice, and if you use it in the wrong place, it's, you know, maybe it ends up being wasted. Or you feel like it's wasted because it doesn't have the impact that it might have otherwise had. So you do have choices here. You can use him in the field. He's got, you know, uses and things like that he can be brought to a field and be very scary. Super tanky, very, very powerful, very, very dangerous. Not armor piercing, though, so he does have lots of raw damage, but armor and shield will still help you stand up to him. Again, that was done with the dwarves in mind, Azaghal and his dragon slayers, who managed to kind of halt Glaurung's advance during the Nirnaeth. Just some of the attention to detail, I guess, that we put into conceiving things and building it in systematically. But he will be able to do just absolute monstrous damage in a siege as well. And you will be able to use him for cracking gatehouses, cracking walls, whatever. But you will need to, 1, keep him alive, and 2, you'll need to use your ammunition very sparingly. You have to think about how you do it. So he's not just a blunt instrument. There is a little bit of precision with this particular character. Anyway, let's move on now. So another temporary model here. I do have some other cool stuff that I want to put in place of this, but again, this is from Botet. Definitely should check out their mod. Probably one of the most influential mods in terms of like the work they've done with animations and modeling anywhere. So highly recommend. Anyway, Sky Darkeners of the Golden Worm. These guys do cause fear. They're more of a, in contrast, I suppose, to Glaurung, who has all those caveats and ways that you want to use him be clever and cagey. These are a blunt instrument. You can throw these at things. They're like a very scary heavy cavalry unit. They'll get on top of stuff like lighter units, skirmishers and things like that, and they'll clear them out pretty quickly, pretty efficiently. They are quite big, and they do have a fairly large hitbox, so they are susceptible to like incoming artillery fire and things like that. Hunter javelins obviously are very good against them. Doriath AP archers can be scary, but they've got a decent amount of armor. They'll stand up to like most small arms projectiles, and a good amount of HP per model, and they've been fairly generous with their model count as well. I think there's like 5 or 6 of them in there at max size. So a very scary unit, more of a blunt instrument, good for clearing out backlines and then smashing into stuff, and being like a persistent threat. And they are fairly quick as well, and they look so cute when they fly around. It's a little silly, but again, mainly Medieval 2 was super jank, right? It's not that bad, but it is kind of goofy. But that's not the fault of the people who animated them. Honestly, you're very limited in what you can do with rigs in Medieval 2. You have a very, very tiny bone count, so you can't animate complex creatures like this, especially things that have like tails and wings and stuff like that. You just can't. Anyway, moving on now. Another model here from Botan. This is the classic Urloki that we've had for ages. Reskin gold in honor of Glaurung the Golden. And they have undergone a few changes. Maybe I can actually show you these guys. No, I seem to have broken a lot of my projectiles, so I won't be able to show you them today. That's odd. I'll have to figure out why that is. But they have an area of effect projectile, similar to what the Urloki have now, except it splits and just showers an area in non-AP damage. And that's something that maybe people have forgotten about, or if you're new to the mod and just kind of joining us for the first time. Fire weapons have been tooled to not be armor piercing and to not be instant kill effects. It's not like flame weapons in regular Medieval 2 where anybody who gets touched by them just gets toasted immediately because it's like Greek fire or something. Flame weapons in honor of the dwarves, and to also add some sort of like limiting factor in it that's like built into our stat system from the ground up, is they're not armor piercing and they are usually about middling damage. So light infantry, for example, usually capped at about 5 shield. Not going to be great defense against 9 attack, especially when they've got like 3 or 4 armor. So light, even medium troops who are unshielded or don't have very good shields can suffer under the punishment of flame weapons. But heavy infantry, they're not even going to notice. And it's night and day. If I had these projectiles working, I don't know why they're broken. Sorry about that. But if I had these projectiles working right now, I could show you. It's night and day. Like, they will destroy a unit of light infantry, but against like Himbring footmen who are upgraded, they'll do like 2 casualties with all of their ammunition. Yeah. So that's what they're for. They also cause fear. And one of the big differences about these guys is that 1, they're cheaper, 2, they're faster, they do more damage, but they're one of the few elephants that can actually run amok. So if you hit these guys with a flaming projectile, which I know is kind of funny, a dragon gets scared by fire, it's Medieval 2 for you. If you hit them with a flaming projectile, they will go amok, and you will lose control of them for the rest of the game. So there is a big limiting factor, and that's a huge one. And that applies to not just flaming projectiles, anything that does big morale shocks. So if a bunch of them are like weak, down to like their last like 5-10 HP, and you throw some hunter javelins at them or something, or 5-10, like 5 or 7 HP, and you throw a bunch of hunter javelins at them, and like 2 or 3 die in rapid succession, they can just run amok, and then that's it. You've cleared them So big limiting factor there. I think they've got a little bit more armor as well than regular Ruliki. But yeah, moving on over here, we have the Bone Rack, a horrible altar on which the remains of enemies are displayed. And this, I think, comes from a really old mod by a really talented guy. His name is already dead. He's been around for ages. I believe it's called Dagor of Silmarillion, which it's pretty cool. It's like all Third Age units brought into a new campaign that he made, like new campaign map, new everything, to proxy for First Age units. So it's like Third Age taking place in the First Age, which is kind of cool. So if you guys are really hungry for a campaign, you need to scratch that itch, you can definitely find that on Total War Center. So yeah, we borrowed this, and what it does is it causes fear. Causes fear. It can also soak up a little bit of damage. I think it's got decent enough height. The units crewing it are Worm called Spearmen, who are lock morale, and it also inspires nearby units for an amount. I think it's like +3 or like +5 in 100 meters. Like, it's enormous. And you'd only ever really be bringing one of these, but again, it's that fear effect, especially if you're, maybe fighting a little bit more defensively. You've got it mixed in with your troops so that they don't run, and then you can smash in with your various fear effects, Glaurung, whatever, collapse in, apply them all in that stacking way, maybe shoot some poison arrows and stuff into them, and you can cause some big routes really, really quickly. I wonder if, my client is bugged here, because even my artillery don't seem to want to shoot anybody. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, maybe I didn't break the projectiles after all. It's just a weird tabbing in, tabbing out thing. But let's do that. Let's kind of show you what this is going to look like. This is the traditional mangonel, I think, that everyone knows and loves. Move these guys back. So it's another 2-stage projectile. We're obviously big fans of those in the mod because of the element of randomness and like self-destruction and stuff that it causes. But this does have an instant kill effect, and people will walk on it. You are limited to 1. That big limiting factor. And because of what it is, there is an effective range that you can use it at. Even if its range was like, I don't know, like 10,000, you can hit anywhere on the board with it. It does still have an internal timer from when the projectile leaves the engine to when it's going to split. And there's a range on that timer. So it's like between, for example, 1 and 5 seconds. And a projectile, depending on its velocity, can only fly so far during that time. So it does have an effective range. It is really nice for shooting into blocks of troops who are just like not paying attention. This will be very strong against the AI. And this can really mess you up if you're not expecting it in campaign, because Glaurung will be in campaign. You won't be able to play as them, but you will have access to some of those units, and you will have to fight against them as well. So if you're not kind of waiting for it, this can be very strong. So yeah, that's the Gaze of Glaurung. That's what it does. Another little asset that we borrowed on a temporary basis from Botet. So that's pretty much the Glaurung faction. I don't think I've missed anybody. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'll try to maybe be, if you guys, this is taking too long and people just want to get into campaign, I can kind of wrap this up and be a bit more brief with 2 of the other factions that we have. But these are actually, I think, ones people will be very excited about. People have asked us to add these for quite some time, and we've been hesitant to do so for a number of reasons. Chiefly that we have a lot of other things on our plate. We didn't want to take up any more development time, but we decided to add them after all. So we have the House of Bayor and the House of Hador. So I might as well put all of them in game, eh? We'll talk a little bit about them here, and then we'll go and we'll look at them on the battlefield as well. So the House of Bayor, oops. Open up my little note thing here. Is a heavily armored Edine faction. They're designed mostly around countering disruption effects, so they're going to have a lot of Relentless in here. These 2 units in particular, these 3 units here in particular, their mid tiers and their legendary company are all going to be Relentless. A lot of their high tiers, I think, are as well. Not the halberds, but it doesn't matter as much for them. Pikemen, we got some spearmen there. but their swordsmen are going to be relentless. Most of these units, I think, are relentless, except for the lower end ones. They're intended, and we've actually really thought about how we want to implement these things and how we would bring them into the game, and how are we going to like fit them in a meta that is, you know, including a growing number of factions. Like what do we got here? We got like 3, 6, 8. It's like 16. It's like 23 factions. I guess 22 if you get rid of rebels who aren't really a faction. How do you fit these guys in there, right? And have them, you know, be relevant and not to be a copy of something else. So we've designed them around acting as something of a counter, not like a hard counter. Like if you bring these guys against the faction they're supposed to counter, they automatically lose. Like, no, that's not what we want to do. But fitting them in there as a counter, especially to factions who are very strong right now, so Angband and Ulfang, as you'll see, seemed to be the way to go about it. And get them in there and get them kind of seamless and have them have a very distinct identity. So Relentless is really useful because it does counter a lot of stagger effects. So I showed you the Mariners of Eärendil before, and like the way that they can trap units. That doesn't happen to units with Relentless because they don't have a stagger animation. It's just been removed from their set. So they can walk right through things like that, like smoke, whatever. They can get a lot closer to polearm units who are very good at poking things at a distance, and that causes that stagger and then pushes people back. And that's kind of the essence of how polearms, especially pikes and things like that, halberds, can be so scary. These guys are good at getting up close and personal and smashing faces with maces. And yeah, it's kind of a soft counter, I suppose, to Angband and polearm stacking in particular, and you'll see why as we go through them. They've got really, really good morale. As you see here, 14, I think, puts them at like the mid-tier range for a lot of elves. Some of these guys, yeah, they're like 18, so they're basically at like Elven tier morale. These guys are even low tier, which is particularly impressive for them, and then it just jumps right up to high tier. There's only a very small mid-tier selection. And they've got decent enough DPS, but it does kind of suffer into high melee defense things. Some things that have like 14, 15 melee defense, they can really struggle to kind of penetrate, especially because a lot of AP, right? 1, 2, 3 mace units right here, and they get a lot of that oomph from having like slightly above average damage, but also armor piercing. So fighting orcs and things like that, they can actually do very, very well. One of the other things is that they upgrade their defense cheaper than they do their attack. They're a little bit more defensively oriented. They've got a lot of armor, good shield values, and things like that. So then we move on to Hador, and the kind of mirror faction, I suppose, that they're intended to soft counter is Ulfang. And they've got some really interesting units here. So many of their lower tier units, these Dorloman tier units, are actually locked morale. In-game explanation for that is that they are kind of low, or like younger men within the house of Hador, trying to emulate the example of Húrin at the Murayath Arnoediad. So remnants of the House of Hador trying to emulate their great heroes, and so they are willing to fight basically to the death here. Move up, they don't have a legendary company per se, but they do have some one-off Elven elites here that they can bring. The Harion tier, they've got lots of different names that I actually didn't make, so I don't know how to say them. But you can figure that out on your own. A lot of heavy infantry, whereas most of the Hador units are going to be light and medium armor, although they do have a decent amount of upgrade potential. Yeah, as I said, medium armor and okay-ish damage, like usually a higher damage than Bayor, but they have really strong upgrade potential. Most of them are not crazy cheap, and they do get a little bit more expensive, but they have lots of numbers, whereas if you look at the House of Bayor, they're much lower. Like their mid-tiers are 120 men in a unit, whereas Hador is going to have 173 or whatever, so they've got like 50 more men. They have a good amount of cavalry, whereas the Hador units, they've only got like a couple trading units of cavalry here, some no-lore cavalry, so a little bit of an elven presence in there, and a really strong unit of 2 HP cavalry bodyguard, but very limited. Whereas that's not the case with Hador. They can actually bring quite a lot of these guys. I think they can bring like 7 or 8 cavalry, which is more than a match for a lot of the Ulfang units. yeah. What they are missing a little bit is missiles, so they don't have a ton of really strong bow options. I think they, in fact, have one that has very limited ammunition. Again, that's kind of mirroring the way it is in Fingolfin, right? So we have the Herdsman and Hithlam up here. They've got a little bit more ammo, but still lower. They specialize more in getting into melee and messing stuff up. That's very much the case for these guys as well. So limited ammunition, and then they've also got some axe throwers that they can hear. And much like the Fingolfin axe throwers, like the Dragon Guard of Dorloman, they've got an extended throw range. Whereas I think, yeah, they clock in at about 90 or something like that. 90 or like 100 or whatever. Where are these guys? Yeah, there you go. 100. I think the Fingolfin description is wrong. I think the Dragon Guard and Fingolfin are also 100. So it's a little bit higher. I think it's like 20 or something like that above the 80 that axe throwers normally clock in at. So they can throw a little bit extra far. So there's some kind of echoes of that. And indeed, to kind of drive the point home, they do have the Idimo Arantar, a reskin of them. This is the personal guard of Fingolfin himself. And yeah, just to sort of show that relationship, that there is like a vassal-lord relationship there. So let's get rid of Angband. Don't really see that right now. And let's go ahead and take a look at these guys on the campaign map here. And then we'll talk a little bit about sieges. And then I think that... Oh no, sieges, and then I'm going to show you some of the new characters who have been added. For campaign, there's like a campaign mode in multiplayer where you can access all the campaign units in addition to the base rosters. And then we'll move on to campaign, and I will pop them to campaign, and I'll show you lots of stuff, and we'll move on from here, because I know we've been... It hasn't been that bad. It only took me about an hour to get through all that. Very excited to see updates on the campaign. Hoping for awesome campaign announcements. Yes, there will be some campaign announcements in here. We're going to talk all about them. And you'll see kind of where we're at, and I have the ability to talk a little bit about some of the places we want to go as well. One of the big things in campaign, I won't digress too much here, we'll get into campaign when we get into it, but one of the things I'm most excited to talk about is our Escalation siege system, because it is pretty unique, and I'm not aware that anyone else is messing around with it. Gyromeister, message retracted. I'm sure it was very nice. I'm sure he wasn't being mean to us at all. It's nice to see you, Gyros. How's it going, buddy? Will there be other options for the Glaurung faction armor besides the bright orange? Yes, I did mention that we will be probably redesigning them. That being said, I do still have, because we went through several iterations, we had people vote on them and what they preferred most, and people preferred the flame metal that we had. But I do still have the other options saved on my computer, and I can make those available to anybody who wants them. That's no problem for me. But you may want to hold off on that. Pending the work the Castellan does. Anyway, let's take a look at the House of Bayor here. Let's get all their infantry. Drop them over here. Legendary Company. Boop. Skirmishers. Boop. Oh yeah, these guys. This is a unit I think is gonna turn some heads. People will either love it or they'll hate it. Oh, I forgot to bring the catapult as well. That's fine. Great. We've got all of that organized. Start over here. First, we have the Sentries of Dorthonion. The whole low tier is going to be Dorthonion. So if you see that, you're going to know that it's meant to be like a low tier unit. A little bit of pikes. They are fairly cheap. Don't have the greatest morale response. They are like a medium pike, I think. They've got decent enough melee defense and things like that, but they're mostly just there to get in the way, buy time, and just be kind of irritating. Just be a unit that you can build other things around that are in the roster. What do we got over here? Got their spearmen. Again, another unit, pairs very, very nicely. Gives you a cheap front line, which I figured that they would need because of how low model count they are overall. This does kind of help make up for that a little bit if you are able to spam your low tiers for a relatively cheap price. I think our base budget is 15k, so 435 before upgrades and things like that is absolutely nothing. Moved on. I think we've got... Yeah, we won't move on to the Skirmishers just yet. Next, we've got the Ninadanath Bulwarks. The thing that's different about them, obviously they are heavy spearmen. They can upgrade and things like that. They've got really good armor, really good defense, really strong shield value. But the thing that's a bit different about them, that's novel for the mod, but perhaps not novel for the multiplayer crowd out there who's watching this, they do have really high mass, especially with shield wall. These guys are able to kind of push through things, and again, that's because they found the faction that they're intended to counter in certain ways, and the playstyle that they like to lean into is like halberd and polearm stacking, and big battle lines, and just presenting an impenetrable wall of just endlessly heavily armored bodies. This is going to help you kind of get around that. It's the only such unit we have in the mod at the moment, and I don't expect that will change too much outside of things like big creatures like Glaurung and like elephants and things like that, who naturally need a bit higher mass than your average man. It's not a mechanic that we really want to just bring everywhere. I want it to be unique to Bayor because it is kind of central to their faction identity, that being like a foe to Angband. Yeah, so if you're worried about, suddenly everyone having these push units and that becoming like the new meta, especially in like sieges that are going to be coming out, that's not going to be the case. You'll have one unit in one faction who's able to do that, that's capped at 2. So it shouldn't be the biggest thing in the world. Yeah, but just to alleviate some of those concerns before they get brought up. Next, we have some halberds. Obviously, halberds are good for fighting other halberds, especially ones with decent enough melee defense. These guys probably will, at the end of the day, I think they might have to have their stat spread here reevaluated a little bit, because halberds with 5 melee defense do really struggle into halberds against numbers. With large numbers, then it becomes a bit of a numbers game. So I think we'll probably drop these guys down to like 12 and then like increase their melee defense to like 10 or like 9 or something, so that they are able to function a bit better in that role as being anti-Angband and being able to be tuned towards fighting numbers. But more or less, they are still a heavily armored halberd. Do a lot of damage. That's quite scary. Armor piercing, nasty against basically anything that gets into them. Your elephants, accidentally wander into these guys, they're going to die off pretty fast. Next, we have some near-to-death pikemen. Again, we have another pike unit over here, so what makes these guys different other than the heavy armor? This is another different unit. So it doesn't have shield wall the way that the other pikes do, or spear wall, my bad. But it does have shield wall, and that does give it a little bit of extra mass. So it is another push unit. They can be surrounded, especially in shield wall, and do extremely well for themselves. They still have the underhand pike animation that is not unique to spear wall. And they don't suffer from that really obnoxious perennial bug that no one seems to know how to fix or address in any way, where if you right-click to attack with a shield wall unit, some of them will turn around and face the other direction over time. These guys don't suffer from that. I wish we knew how to fix it. If someone out there, I don't know, maybe Gyros is out there and knows how to fix that, please tell me, because I would love to be able to fix that, or at least find some workaround that I can tell to people. But that's what they do. Oops. Next we have the Sword Masters. Bog standard. They do inspire, which is particularly useful. And they are also relentless. They are one of the relentless units. So a really good anchor to your line, whereas a lot of units like the Macemen are only medium, lower melee defense, because that's what maces tend to have. These guys are swordsmen with heavy armor and shield, and have actually pretty good melee defense there. Think back to the Feanor units we were looking at. They had like 2 melee defense. That is quite high. Moving on now, we have the first company for the shield bearers. Maybe we won't look at the first company right away. We'll look at the base model that they're kind of based off of. Boop. And yeah, they are Macemen. They've got Relentless. They can upgrade their armor for a little bit cheaper. Not crazy good defense, but you are able to bring them up to 9 armor, which will bring them from the medium tier up to heavy, which is really nice, with none of the penalties, attendant penalties that usually come with that, like less melee defense, slower penalties in the woods, and things like that. These guys do avoid that by upgrading into it. You pay an extra cost for it, though. Relentless makes them really strong. They do get those nice bonuses in woods, especially if you are able to take an Angband army composed of like polearms and heavy infantry in woods or wood terrain. That's going to be absolutely huge, because they're going to be taking big penalties and you're going to be getting bonuses, and you've got all those other things going for you as the House of Bayor. that can kind of turn the tide of battle in your favor in a really big way, but a subtle way, not like an overt, flashy way. Let's go to the two-handed variant over here. They actually slap pretty hard. I think the shield bears can get 2 armor upgrades, whereas I think these guys can simply get 1, as they're more of an offensive-oriented unit, so to try and balance that out and give you a reason to take the shielded variant. These guys do have a little bit less of armor potential, but they hit like absolute trains. 16 is really good. That will go through almost anything. Very scary against elephants. But 8 defense skill does make them vulnerable in melee, and it does make them vulnerable to area attacks from elephants and so forth. So something to consider when using them, but yeah, they hit really hard. Relatively cheap for what they do. Like, that's a lot of damage and like AP and stuff. 720 is not cheap, but it's also not a ton. That being said, like most units in the Bayor roster, they do suffer from that penalty to their size. Let's go over now to the first company. Just quickly check chat here. No, I haven't missed anything else yet. First company, they are a much more heavily armored variant of the Macemen over there. They've got a little bit less of a strong morale response, and that's going to be true for most of the first companies. Probably forgot to mention that. Think of it as like a first cohort who's beholden to the general. The lower morale response means that they do take shocks when that general dies, just because that's their commander and benefactor. So there is that kind of relationship there that would be easy to miss, so I feel the need to point it out. But yeah, much higher armor, a lot more men in the unit, so it does kind of make up for the fact that these guys are also so small. But they are... I think they don't have Relentless. I think that's the difference here. The big difference is that, unlike the smaller unit, they don't have Relentless. They have a lot more staying power, and I think a bit better damage as well. Nope, same damage. What else do we got? One of the few Elven units in the faction. We have the Arato Angamaite. Probably said that right. Anyway, another mace unit, armor piercing, very scary, 2 HP, lots of armor. Not as much as some of the other heavy Bayor units, but they do have really good defensive skill, and they've got that kind of high skill Elven vestigial shield bonus that many such units have. Sort of as a representation of the firstborn's, you know, more powerful constitution, reflexes, whatever you want it to be. Some people like to say that it's like Jedi reflexes, you know, batting things out of the air. It's whatever, it's fine. But this is one of their only 2 HP bodyguard units. I don't think these guys have it. So yes, this is one of their few multiple hit point units outside of the cavalry. So overall, Bayor is very vulnerable to things that do lots of like 1 damage in a large area kind of thing, rangers and so forth. Can thin them out really quickly. But these guys don't have to worry about that nearly as much. Good armor, lots of damage. They do inspire, as you expect a general's bodyguard to do. That, I think, is going to do for the infantry. So let's move on to the skirmishers. This is their first little bodyguard here, called the Huntmasters of Eluine. I think they have... I could be wrong, but they have a 2-handed spear. No, they have a mace, actually. So they're like a scarier version of the macemen. They've got relentless. They've got really high damage, and they've also got decent enough missile attack. So one of the few, like, actually the only high-tier archer I think that they have in the whole faction. They do inspire. They do all kinds of nice stuff for it. It's a nice little hybrid unit that you can use in a variety of different ways. So a lot of AP, as I'm sure you've seen. We've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 so far mace units. And some of the smaller guys are going to have some maces as well. Not too much to say there, I don't think. Moving on to the Outriders of Reveal. This is a Noldor unit. One of the big racial things the Noldor do is that they have really high damage. So you notice that 10 attack there. They are armed with spears, which is going to make them excellent at fighting other cavalry. This is very much a trading unit. It's not super expensive, but it's not cheap either. I think it can be upgraded. I think its armor can be upgraded, and its attack certainly can be as well. A really nice kind of upper mid-tier, high-tier trading unit. That's not too expensive, but also not cheap either. You can bring a couple of them, as of the cavalry cap pass that we did. So not too many, but they do have the ability to hide in long grass. A lot of units are going to have that, and you'll see that. Should be able to see it as like this bright green texture on terrain. There's a lot of units that can hide in that. I think we jumped over to cavalry there just by accident. Well, oops, we did a little bit out of order. Archers of Dorthonion, so a lower tier archer. Not very many of them, but a decent enough supporting unit. This is a unit that I could see maybe getting a little bit of a numbers boost in the near future, or getting something else that kind of helps them, trade upwards. One of the things they do have currently is that despite being a lower tier archer, they do have that mid-tier 7 attack. I think lower tier archers usually clock in at about 5 or 6. Decent enough. Melee attack 6, not really gonna win any competitions, but they do have really nice melee defense skill as well. And I think they have shield. That's the big thing that makes them an excellent trading unit. So in the mod, shielded units, this is part of the overhaul, shielded archers, they take a penalty to range. So you have to get them a little bit closer, which means that other unshielded archers will have a chance to, deal a little bit of damage before these guys are able to set up. But once they get there, they do have that really nice shield value, and that does keep them alive for quite a while. So it's an okay trading unit. I could see them either getting more numbers or maybe getting a bit more shield value. Maybe bringing them up to 5, I think, would make them a bit more of a competitive pick. But at the moment, they're all right. Popping over here, we've got some spearmen armed with slings. So a really nice mid-tier unit. I think a lot of slings actually had their range increased by about 10 or 20. So they're just shy of bow range for like lower tier bowmen. You usually clock in about 160. I think these guys are about 140. But they generally have shields, and they fire quite quickly, and they're really good at picking on like light archers, especially. These guys have, I think, 7 missile attack, which is a bit higher. I'm wondering why we have it so high. It might be that it doesn't have armor piercing, but it's a little bit more just like for punching other skirmishers directly in the face. And they are shielded as well. Should probably be a little bit more shielded than that. I think it needs to go up to 5. Oh, no, maybe I had this wrong. Ha! It's because I didn't click it. Yeah, so they do have the 1 missile attack, but it is really good at still dealing with unshielded light archers. A lot of things aren't going to be able to stand up to the volume of fire, especially how quickly they can throw it downfield. They do have a proper shield value. There you go, at 5. Yeah, see. I know myself. I would have wanted to have that at 5. They have spears as well, so they can be used as a screen. In fact, I think they have the screen keyword, so they're a little bit faster, able to kind of move forward, skirmish, retreat as they need to. And they are lightly, medium armor, the lower end of medium armor. And then I think this is the last skirmish unit that we've got for them. Let's see if I missed anything in chat here. Will Angrod and Ignor be in the Bayor faction, House of Finarfin? I would guess. I did say that they're AP in melee, Mr. X. I said they have maces. Will Angrod and Ignor be in the Bayor faction or House of Finarfin? That's a good question. It actually hasn't come up in the in dev chat yet. I could see them going either way. But those are the kind of people who are going to get like campaign bodyguards almost certainly. But we'll talk about that when we get to campaign. We're almost done here. We have, we're going to wrap these guys up, and then we're going to move on to Hador, and I'll go through them as quickly as possible. And then we're going to move into campaign, and we'll start up the campaign, and I'll show you kind of what's been done. But at the moment, there's nothing decided for the fate of those 2 particular brothers of Finrod. But yeah, the Dorthonion guys here, they are harassment javelins. We've talked about those a few times. Pretty well the same. I think, I don't know what they have as a secondary weapon. I think it might be a mace. Or it might be an axe or something like that. Or maybe even 10 defensive skill, they're almost certainly a sword with their secondary, because swords will have higher melee defense but lower damage. And we've got a lot of templates for weapons that kind of define their role, in addition to like roll bonuses and weight class. So there's a lot of diversity that way, but yeah, it's a pretty sure thing that they're going to be 10. That if they're 10, they're going to be swords. They are just harassment javelins, exactly what you'd expect them to be. Good at dealing with longer range skirmishers. They kind of overlap a little bit with the hunters. These guys can do more damage to do things with a little bit more armor, so you probably want to use them to kind of punch through that, as opposed to the slingers. Whereas the slingers, they throw faster, so they will put more volume fire down the way. But let's move on now to the House of Hador. I'm not going to have a chance to organize them because it is the AI. So let's just take a look here. Oh, actually won't let me open up their stat blocks, so we'll have to go back here. Which is fine, because that will give me a chance to actually organize them. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Probably better if we go back and actually look at them properly, and then I can give you guys the breakdown. We can be organized about this. So let's do it differently. We're going to organize them by tier. Bodyguard. Other bodyguard. And you can be here. So we have the first and like lowest tier of the army. They are quite numerous. These guys are going to have two-handed axes, but they're not going to be armor piercing. They do have. This is one of the exception factions that does have an armor piercing axe. I'll show you that in a moment. Very, very low on armor and defense. Extremely, extremely vulnerable to missiles, but obviously they punch up a lot for being a low-tier unit. 12, 19 charge makes them an excellent trading unit. They are a little bit expensive, but that is because they have locked morale. Good bonuses in woods and snow and things like that. And they do have decent enough stamina. They are a bit different in terms of their longevity on the battlefield with stamina than the House of Bayor. One of the things I did forget to mention that does contrast with the House of Hador is that the House of Bayor has the best stamina traits on anything that's not a low tier. And anything that is low tier, I think, has mid-tier stamina traits, whereas these guys, I think they're just mid-tier stamina traits pretty well across the board, with the exception of the elves. But a nice little trading unit. You can bring multiples of them. I think this is the unit you can bring the most of out of any unit in the Hador faction. So if you want a lot of swarminess, some good trading stuff, and you're not too worried about missiles, or you just want to soak up some missiles, the Axemen can be okay at that. They are a little bit expensive, so they can't just be used too recklessly. Beastlayers of Dorloman, deceptively strong. So we have created a new class of two-handed spear units to kind of function as shock units, and the big thing that separates them is that they have a new animation set. I believe Alexios brought it in from Reforged, so it's like the two-handed spear animation that like the Fountain Guard over there used, which is apparently very strong. And these guys are very, very tough as a result of that. They are also locked morale, bonus fighting cavalry, but what they don't have, and what makes them different from other units, is they don't have the spear reflect traits. And those spear reflection traits are tied to the hidden inbuilt spear penalty that against infantry and things like that. So these guys don't suffer from it. Instead, I've taken everything that they would have otherwise gotten and just shifted it onto their anti-mount bonuses. So they are still good against cavalry, but they do skirt around the penalty that the spearmen take in that way, which I think is clever. Yeah, bonus in the woods and snow, which is pretty much going to be the case for, I think, almost every unit in the Hador faction. That's one of their kind of defining things, is that they are really good in those kinds of terrain, especially their light infantry, as light infantry do take additional, or do gain additional power in woods across all factions. A little bit more expensive, and they are a bit less capped in multiplayer. I think you can bring like 3 of them, whereas these guys you can bring like 5 or 6. And that's to kind of limit how powerful that two-handed spear animation can be. They are very, very vulnerable to missiles, obviously, and that's one of the biggest counters to them. But let's move on here. Ooh, Huntsmen of Dorloman, hiding behind a bush, as they would. And another two-handed spear unit, so another really nice like screening unit. Can be used to defend back lines, attack from relative safety, and if cavalry manages to get through there, then they're going to have a very bad time against these guys. I don't think that they share the same animation, so these guys use just like a regular two-handed animation, whereas these guys have that special one that I mentioned that came in from Reforged, which is extra strong. So there's no overlap there in terms of the melee. These guys are distinctively worse in melee, but they do have the reflect bonuses, and that's kind of one of the big things that sets them apart, aside from their bow, obviously. And a little bit cheaper as well, but still locked morale. Let's move on up here to the mid-tier side of things, and that's going to be the Hithlam tier. So we have the Housecarls here, and when I was talking a little bit about how this is a faction with strong upgrade potential, this is kind of what I had in mind. This is one of the few units that can upgrade twice. The other one is this little unit of cavalry over here. They don't have the greatest attack, but they do have decent enough melee defense, and there is quite a lot of them. So with 2 upgrades, I believe the conventional wisdom is that upgrades are about equivalent to 2 armor, even though they only increase it visually by like 1 on the little card here. But in effect, you can bring them up from 7 to 11 armor. And they do have a little precursor javelin, so they can punch up a little bit, especially against medium or lighter units, or even shock infantry who don't have a ton of armor. Even with tons of armor, just the volume of fire these guys can put downfield can be enough to make people fail quote-unquote armor saves. So yeah, they can punch up with that little range thing that they do, and they are a really nice kind of anchor, especially with that upgrade. So really potentially very strong unit. Hador in general will also upgrade their attack for cheaper, so you can upgrade their attack, invest a little bit into their armor upgrades, which will be more expensive, but that's fine. And you've got a unit that's got, last I spoke to Jojo, attack upgrades are actually extra 3 damage. So you'd be looking at a unit with 11 armor, 3 damage, 9 defense, 7 shield. It's pretty good that you can bring in numbers as well. Let's move on to their Legendary Company equivalent. Oops. Not Legendary Company, First Company. And that's going to be a version of them with a bit less armor, a lot more melee defense, a little bit extra shield, and crazy, crazy high numbers. Like looking at that there, that's almost nearly maxed out, right? These guys are 173. These guys are not. They've got shield wall. I think they also have an inspire ability, so very much an anchor unit. Not going to, win the day on their own. Not going to like kill their way through an Angband army or even an Ulfang army, but they will stand their ground and inspire other units around them to do the same. Warriors of Hithlam are the next one. Mid-tier kind of shock unit. They do have more damage, but one of the big differences is that 1, they have a shield. 2, they have an armor upgrade, so you can bring them up to 9, which makes them much sturdier already than the Dorloman tier 2 handed axes. And they have armor piercing. The caveat is that they are not they're not locked morale. In fact, none of the Hithlam tier is. So that's the big defining characteristic of the lowest tier, is that they're all very like young, brave men eager to prove themselves, whereas these are more seasoned warriors. They do have pretty good morale. I think they're like 15, 16, which is quite high. But they do have a sense of mortality in their old age, which anyone out there who's old, I'm sure, will resonate with. But yeah, armor piercing is kind of their big thing, and that's the thing that sets them apart the most. They can do lots of damage, decent enough defense skill, but with that armor upgrade, they are actually quite good. Over here, Axe Guard of Hithlam. They are throwing axes, so they need that direct line of sight. Throwing axes, in addition to having higher damage, also have higher mass, so they can knock people over. A little bit of a disruption weapon, which you'd expect would happen if people threw, 200 axes your way. You guys would probably stop and think and maybe raise your shields, and some of you might stagger, might get hit, etc., etc. So very much like a shock and kind of terror weapon in certain ways. And they all also do it at a higher range. Being axe units, they do have a higher base speed than other non-axe units, so they're going to be a little bit faster than the Huskarls, or whatever the sword unit is called again. And they also have much higher charge damage. So if we kind of contrast the two, these guys are like 7 missile attack, 3 charge bonus, whereas you go over to these guys, they've got a lot less melee defense, or a little bit less melee defense anyway, about a third less, but they do have a lot higher attack, a lot higher charge, and that's going to be typical for axes pretty well across the board. So yeah, that's what you can expect from an axe unit like that. They are fairly expensive. I think they're more expensive than the Huskarls, because of how much damage and charge and missile attack they have, but yeah, it's a decent price to pay for something that's got good shield. If anyone is familiar with the Doriath faction, their axe throwers are light axemen, so they're even more vulnerable than these guys, and they are very, very useful parts of the roster. I think that will... Nope, we have one more. A mid-tier cavalryman here. Riders of Hithlam, another unit that is able to upgrade itself quite a lot and become much stronger than what it is. It does get very expensive when you upgrade it, up to about 1,000 or so. so you do have to invest a decent amount into them. But you will be looking at a unit that's got like 11 armor. It's melee cav. It's got axes, so it has like pretty high like base damage and charge bonus. It's a really strong trading unit that can do very well into Ulfang units, for example, as they are kind of built to be that counter. Like a lot of light units and lightly shielded units and things like that, their harassment javelins are going to cut right through all of that. It is still armor piercing, even if it's only 4 attack. So it's going to have armor and shield, and it's also going to ignore melee defense entirely. So that can be a real terror for the House of Ulfang. That's going to be what they're particularly good at fighting, hopefully, at least once we've finished up with them. So moving on now, we've got Scouts of Hithlam. An unshielded version. These guys are locked morale, so they do kind of borrow a little bit from the Lowman tier. So I guess there is one Hithlam unit that is locked morale. And they've also got Hunter Javelins. You can see that nasty 14 missile damage there. Very good at cutting through heavy armor, hunting down elephants and things like that. I think that they've got a particular bonus against fighting elephants, whereas they take penalties, I think, against horsemen, or they don't have as good of bonuses against horsemen as the axemen. And they've also got no shield and no access to armor. Oh, they've got 2-handed axes. There you go. So yeah, they can be, I think, fairly scary, but these guys I think are better both because they've got higher bonuses against cavalry, and they've got more longevity through their higher melee defense, armor, shield, etc., etc. These are more of a shock unit. You'll be able to just throw them at something, try and delete it, and then follow up. These guys are kind of your holding guys. I think that does it for the mid tiers. Let's go up to their kind of high tiers. This is their legendary company equivalent, and each one of these is going to have something that's particularly good at fighting, in addition to the roles that specialize them for various tasks throughout the battlefield. Obviously, these are halberds. Can be very, very scary against like armor and things like that. Cavalry for sure. I believe they have a particular bonus against fighting dragons. So now that we've added Glaurung and all those extra dragons into the game, obviously we need to have some sort of countermeasures. So these guys can get on top of Glaurung and his Urloki in particular. And this includes both the Glaurung and the Angband Urloki. Then they can cut them apart very, very quickly. Especially with that shield wall and things like that. They've all got access to armor upgrades, so you can bring them up to like 14 armor, which means that they're more or less impervious to fire and things like that. Yeah, very, very scary. These guys, I think, can upgrade their armor twice, so a little bit more of a defensively oriented unit, and they're also a bit of a brick with some Inspire that you can park down right in the middle of your Hithlam units and expect them to fight harder and for much, much longer. Especially as they begin to get tired, a unit like this, who doesn't get tired as easily and is able to buff morale, is going to be extremely important. And all of these guys are basically Noldor on loan from their Liege Lord Fingolfin. So lower numbers, high damage, 10 attack there on a spear unit's pretty high. Lots and lots of armor, and you can buff that up to, I think, about 17. So very, very hard to break down this unit. A really, really good anchor. Let's go over to these guys here. And the thing that's different about them is that these guys are relentless, so no stagger animations. They can walk through smoke and other disruption effects, and if they're surrounded, then they're not being stagger chained into oblivion. They just keep trucking and trucking until they're completely destroyed. Lots and lots of damage there. They've got that kind of higher end Elven, like Jedi reflex shield value that we have there, the vestigial shield value to 3. I think that they upgrade their armor once, so they can go up to 14. Good defense skill. They also do cause fear. Like most heavy infantry, and this is going to apply to anything that starts as heavy infantry but doesn't upgrade in, they're not going to be able to hide pretty much anywhere. So they can't hide in forests and things like that. So they are very much like up in your face, out in the open, largely playing different roles. These guys are a bit more defense or offensively oriented, whereas the halberds are a mix of the two, and the spears are more defensive. Let's move on to the bodyguard tier. We've got the, oh god, I can't say any of these names. I'm sorry, I didn't actually make any of them. These are Stewie's. I'll have to get like a pronunciation guide or something and include it in a PDF so people don't lose their minds trying to talk about this game. But the Etienne Goldie is a hybrid unit. They've got really good missile attack. 10 is extremely high. think that's like green elf tier high. They've got a decent enough melee attack, but it is a spear. And I think that it has an armor-piercing charge. So there's sort of like a hybrid bow lancer cav, which means that they are not amazing against other horsemen, but they are really good at preying on infantry. So if you can keep these guys moving, especially given that they don't have crazy high shield value, you probably do want to keep them moving, keep them out of the way of missiles. They can actually stand up to fire for long enough to really be a pain in the ass, especially clearing out backlines. Or supporting other cavalry. They can mix them in with some of the Hithlam tier, and yeah, they can be a formidable force indeed. But yeah, some harassment at range, some nasty charges in melee. Only 1 HP, which is pretty normal for a lot of bodyguards who tried to move away from 2 HP units a little bit. And I think, unlike most 1 HP bodyguards, you can only bring one of these guys. Because they are so good. I mean, you wouldn't maybe guess by their stats, but they are actually extremely effective. You wouldn't have as much of a reason, I think, to bring these scary guys over here, which are another human unit. They are 1 HP. They've got that vestigial shield value as well to sort of represent that they are very elite. High defense. I don't think that they can upgrade their armor, so they are a little bit lower on the armor side of things for heavy units. I mean, 11 is still quite formidable. They do have a two-handed animation for fighting on horseback, much like the not Huskarls, what are these guys called? Scouts of Hithlam. Much like the Scouts, they have that two-handed animation, which can be very scary. They do inspire nearby troops, which can be useful for, again, pairing them up with the Hithlam tier, because they are not locked morale, so a nice little support unit to kind of play into what those Hithlam units do very well in melee. Can't hide, as they are heavy units. And a bonus fighting cavalry, because they are melee cavalry. What else do we have? Yes, so we have a unit here of Ballista. It's Bladesman of Baron Ithel, which is the same crew as the Ballista in the Fingolfin faction. Again, tying in that they are actually a vassal of the House of Fingolfin. And then finally, we have the Aedimo Arantar with a little bit of a reskin there to kind of match the red of the rest of the faction. And they are the Aedimo Arantar from Fingolfin. So since the overhaul, they have gone up to 3. Relentless, lots of defense here. You can upgrade them twice. Very scary unit with a lot of buffing and support characteristics. And they do have a bonus against Morgoth, which will be important in this next part. So that's going to be the 2 new factions so far. Let me just see if we still have people here. We have some questions since they're on loan from Golfim and not an actual part of the House of Hador. Wouldn't the Noldor in the Hador faction have the blue heraldry of Fingolfin instead of the red heraldry of Hador? Could go either way. This helps them feel a little bit more situated, I suppose, in the overall like look and aesthetic of the faction. And it just, to me, it makes sense to have a reskin that fits the faction that they're being slotted into. But it could go either way. I don't think either of them is wrong. But let's wrap up multiplayer here. I have only 2 more very short things that I want to show you. One of them is temporary, but they do also have some implications for campaign, and then we're going to jump right into campaign right after this. So we've seen Glaurung already. We won't go back to that. But I did add some hero units. One of them is temporary. I do have a model that I got from Castellan. It doesn't have textures, so I have tried to texture it to the best of my ability, which is meager, to say the least, especially compared to some of the other people out there. But we also have Gothmog. So currently, we're using as a stand-in the old Sauron model. But again, I do have a unique model for Morgoth. It just has to be textured. And I'm working on that right now. We have Morgoth Bauglir, the Black King of Arda. He has been added in, and you'll see him in campaign, but there's some differences. So elephants, to my knowledge, and mounts in general cannot act as generals. So you will have various iterations, I suppose, of Morgoth throughout the campaign. This will be a version that's available in the campaign multiplayer, and also will be spawned by a script for a duel event, say with Fingolfin, and if you lose him, then I think you lose the game. And how we're going to go about doing that, we've yet to determine, but that's the idea. This will be a script version, but you also have him available if you want to play the silly version of multiplayer that we do have available. He's got a really cool, and this is some of the new, pause him for now. Some of the new projectile effects that I was talking about earlier with the Mariners of Erendil and other things like that. So what this does, and this has to be used quite carefully because this can screw you over as well if you're playing as Angband, is that he actually has a map-wide ability. Let's see if I can get him to actually pop it off. So what that does is it just kind of goes off, but it's a shatter effect. So it shatters and it affects everything that isn't locked morale. So if we actually move this guy a little bit closer, you have to be within a certain range in order to see it. You can see these guys are already at shaken. So what this does is it applies a map-wide morale debuff. I believe it's -2 at the moment. It's like -1 or -2, whatever it ends up being in its final iteration. And that will apply to your own orcs. That will apply to enemies. That will apply to your allies. So if you're playing with this in multiplayer, be very careful with how you use it. And the reason that is one, because we do have certain restrictions in being able to. Can't just have it apply to friendlies. And 2 is to just stop you from, like, you know, beginning of the game, I immediately use it. This is to make you think about it a little bit. So if you pop this ability at the wrong time and your orc troops are already hard-pressed and on the verge of routing, you can kill yourself by routing your own orcs. Anything that isn't locked morale will suffer from this. You can also pop it at the wrong time and screw over one of your allies. So you do have to be careful and situationally aware with how you decide to do it, because it will literally hit everything on the map. I think within like a 1,000-meter radius, which is basically everywhere. So it might miss a few people, but it will get the majority of the units on the map. So there is a little bit of thought that has to go into it, but it is kind of cool. Again, playing into the theme of, like, you damage yourself in order to get something cool that, like, Sauron does, whether it's lots of damage, or in this case it's a minus to morale. But it can be extremely, extremely strong. Like, you can very easily cause mass routes with this at the right moment. And you can actually tune an army to bring lots of fear effects and things like that in order to maximize the potential of it. So it's a really cool thing that I don't think I've seen anyone else use it in other mods and things like that, so that's kind of neat. That's what he does. So let's get him out of the way. We also have a model for Gothmog, which is your basic Balrog unit. I have taken the axe away from the other Balrogs because that's something that Gothmog uses specifically. I am making a little whip in Blender to hand out to the rest of them to kind of complete the look. But he's got that, like, very scary looking helmet there, and you can see he's got, like, teeth kind of coming through it, so it's very, very fearsome looking. Whereas the other Balrogs will not have his axe, they will not have the helmet, and they do have some slight differences in their skins as well. I think he's got a little bit, like, blacker armor, and they've got something that's a little bit more, like, reddish. So he's visually distinct, and he does have an ability called Lash of Torment. So it is deals armor-piercing damage in a line, so it is body piercing. So let's try it out here, and it does have a slight morale effect attached to it as well. So he does play nicely with Fingolf, and you can see that difference there, right? Took him from shaken down to wavering. Now if you decide to bring him in there, you're going to be able to route these guys off. Again, this is like a low-end unit. This is not something we're thinking of bringing in for multiplayer. This is going to be pure just campaign chaos, and obviously nothing is final right now, right? So there's lots and lots of time for this to kind of be smoothed out and reiterated upon. But this is kind of where we're at, where we're thinking in terms of, like, design space. So he's going to get in there, do his Morgoth thing, and he's going to be able to break them very, very easily as well. And this can hit your own troops. His little Lash of Torment can hit your own troops as well. So you can hit your own orcs. You can cause the same kind of chaos to them as well. And they will eventually reform. It's not like a permanent thing. And the thing to note, the big thing here, and a limiting factor in this combo, is that multiple morale states do not stack with each other. So if I have this one here from Morgoth, which is like -1 or -2 in 1,000 meters, I think it literally lasts for like 10 or 15 minutes. Whereas this guy, he will drop it temporarily for about 5 seconds to a greater degree than Morgoth will. Then they will cancel each other out. So if, you know, Morgoth's lasts for 15 minutes and this guy's lasts for 5 seconds, after 5 seconds, that unit will return to normal. So you cannot stack them indefinitely on a whole bunch of units. So that is another big limiting factor and something that I kind of learned a little bit. But yeah, so that's an important thing to note, is that you can override them, especially when they have different morale states and 2 different competing effects, and you won't be able to route them in the same way. So these guys didn't immediately route the way that they did previously, but now they will once Gothmog gets in there, because we're, again, stacking fear trait effects, but projectile effects do not stack that way. They will override each other, and they will override the duration. So you do have to be a little bit careful with that, and that is kind of a way out of it. So if you have, if you're playing with Nanda and Gorthav, they've got lots of poison projectiles. Those also affect morale in the same way that Morgoth's thing does. They will override if they shoot a unit who's already been affected by this. So there is also a limited window that you can really make this work. So if you're playing in campaign and you're just being kind of silly with it, then you can be like, hey, I'm going to pop this ability. Don't shoot at these things. We're going to try and mass route them here. So it just requires some communication in that regard as well. So not just kind of brainlessly. You do it, and then it's super powerful forever, and yeah. But let's see. How many people do we got? We got 8 people. Do you have any other questions here before I move on to campaign? We're kind of coming to the end of the multiplayer side of things, and I'm going to start talking a little bit more about campaign. As much as I'm able to. There are people on the team who know more about campaign than I do. I have talked with them before the stream, so I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. But yeah, I'm not an expert on it. It's not my main area of design, the way that multiplayer is. That's kind of my big focus. Let's see here. Let me play one of the Dwarven factions. Why not? Okay, so I'll load this in. I'll give people a couple of minutes here to ask any additional questions they may have. Will Hurin be a general for the House of Ingolfin or the House of Hador? I'm pretty sure he will. I don't think he is in the moment. But he is in-game as a unit. There's the Sons of Hurin. He's got his own model. I believe he operates as an officer within that, so it should be unique on the campaign. Just him. You only get one of them, but it will be a very strong unit. That is like Lock Morale. You guys have probably played the mod before, so I'm pretty sure you know what that unit's capable of. I'm sure he will be in. I don't know if he is at the moment. I haven't played too much with the Fingolfin campaign. Fingolfin's actually bugged. He's I gotta fix his age because he's like 80. He's not currently immortal, so he usually dies by like turn 2 because he's so damn old. So that's something that will have to be fixed. I did fix it for Morgoth, so you know the faction doesn't die in 2 turns. But yeah, still very much work in progress. But let's talk a little bit of campaign features now. I don't think we have any other questions that are forthcoming for campaign. So one of the first things I want to get out there is that we are using EOP 4.0, which has some really cool features in it. So if you're on the campaign map, so if you are on the campaign map and you're like, I think I might want to fight a battle here, you can middle mouse click. You will have an option that comes up to view battle map. You click that view battle map, and now you can go in and you can look around and you can explore the field. I don't know if this is going to have the right settlement attached to it. Oh, yeah, currently it's the Black Gate, so obviously we have some work to do in that regard. But if we go back to the campaign map, you do that by just hitting escape. And then you return to the campaign map. And you can do that as many times as you want. But you can basically just like zoom in. You've got that like bird's eye view of the entire map. And view the battle map over here just to see what it looks like. Yeah, there you go. So you can see where you're going to fight, what kind of terrain it's going to have, the vegetation, and things like that. And because we have so many units that have strong bonuses in campaign, which we talked about in the multiplayer section, that can be really relevant tactical information for you. Like, do I want to fight here? Do I want to fight somewhere else? If I'm fighting orcs in a desert, the orcs are going to have bonuses because they love fighting in like desolation and filth. Whereas the elves, like the green elves especially, will do really well in forests. So that's something you will be able to kind of think about and gather some information before you choose a battleground. So that's really cool. EOP also has lots of other campaign stuff, but again, I'm not hugely familiar with campaign. I am still learning how to do a lot of the stuff alongside the guys on the team who already know how to do a lot of it. So I can't really enumerate all of the many benefits, but there are many and they are manifold. So that's something we'll see more of And one of the big benefits that it does bring is some really cool scripts that you can add. Currently, we do not have any scripts active in the campaign. I believe Alex is going to be working on a few kind of like basic like starting scripts. But if you are out there and you are watching and you want to see this campaign brought to fruition and you want to be part of our really creative and passionate team, we are looking for people to join up with us who know how to do some scripting. I believe the coding language it uses is Lua, which is super, super old. It's like 20-something years old as a coding language. I don't think it really gets used too much in professional settings anymore, but it is very easy to pick up and to learn, especially because of the amount of resources out there. So if you are familiar with Lua, or you want to learn how to do it and you want to commit to helping us out with that, but very much appreciate the assistance there. The team is really looking for some new scripters, and we have lots of cool ideas that we want to explore. So yeah, you can always join up to the Discord. If you don't have a link to that, I will put one in the chat afterwards. Anyway, moving on. Recruitment. So currently on live, I think there's like 2 factions that have recruitment. It's like Feanor and I think maybe one other. All factions now have some ability to have recruitment. So let me talk a little bit about what's different about our recruitment that maybe you're not going to be used to. So see this little iron resource here? This is important because, one, it signifies all the things that you could do with iron. A lot of the UI here was actually done by Alexia, so I figured I'd point that out. A really cool dwarven UI. We've got some mines. So what it means is you can do this economy stuff, which is super useful, but also it means that there is a hidden resource present on that tile. And that hidden resource we are calling the quote-unquote iron recruitment, just to link it to something that you can visually see on the campaign map, that allows you to recruit military units at all. So if it doesn't have this, you will not be able to make your military units. But what you will be able to make is much more powerful economic buildings. So there are going to be 2 basic tiles. You have your iron tiles. Well, I guess there'll be 3, but we'll talk about the other one in a second. So iron tiles, which is where you can recruit your military units. They're going to be like logistics hubs, extremely important. Losing them will hurt. Gaining them will be difficult, but it will bring you great rewards in terms of your ability to expand. So it's not just going to be, I make 10,000 armies and I have like 50, tiny little armies of captains running around because I can spam my units out everywhere. One of my big pet peeves, and I know a lot of people share this dislike, is when you get to that mid to late game in most Total Wars. I understand from talking to DAC players that this is a thing in DAC as well, where you're just fighting stacks and stacks and stacks of people. And it kind of gets a little bit tedious and a little bit annoying. And the main difficulty comes not necessarily from your ability to best the AI in battle, but your ability to efficiently grind down those stacks. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is what I've heard from talking to people. And I have experienced it myself in a lot of other Total War games. So this is kind of meant to address that. So you and the AI will only be able to recruit from these limited places. So that means that battles for you will feel like meaningful progress, and defeats will feel difficult, crushing. It will set you back. However many turns. And you will have very long campaigns. We are going to be running, it's not working at the moment, but we'll be running 12 turns per year. So, to get through the first stage will, I think, what is the first stage, like 150 years? So to get through the first stage, you will be at like 750 turns or something to really elapse through everything. So you will have time to recover from that, but big setbacks from losses will actually hurt, and they will mean something to you, and you will kind of feel the loss of generals, and you will have ways to kind of cultivate generals to do things that you want them to do. And I will talk about that a little bit in a second here. Why is Novgorod further north of Belagast? Probably because we made a slight mistake there, and I think it needs to be changed, but I don't know. I'm not in charge of that, but I believe there's some discussion around whether or not we move it down a little bit farther north and basically switch the starting positions of Belagast and Novgorod. But yeah, it's a good catch. Yeah, so recruitment is working for everybody. Everybody will be able to do lots of stuff with it. I am actually also looking for testers because I did make some big sweeping changes to recruitment. We had a vestigial recruitment system before where basically everyone was capped at like 40 turns per unit, which obviously is a little bit ridiculous and slows the campaign down hugely. So I have changed that, and it's now it's a bit of a spitball. So certain, like Sindar, will reproduce more quickly than Noldor, and the Noldor will reproduce less quickly than the Sindar, and then humans kind of sit in the middle of all of that. Whereas I think Sindar will be some of the most common Elven units on the campaign map. And the Orcs, currently I might have broken them a little bit, but you can hop into our testing and kind of help us figure this out, because I am going to be looking for single player testers. But the Orcs, they really throw a lot at you very, very quickly. You'll be getting like a unit every turn, and that's probably a little bit too much, because as I said, I want to limit stack spam, not increase it by tenfold. But the best way to have some influence over that and to make yourself heard on it would be to join our Discord and come and help us do some single player testing. I will be, once this patch is ready to be released to our internal testing team, I will be looking for single player testers, and I need people who are experienced, and we will be sitting down, we will be talking about like our approach and our philosophy to campaign and to the mod as a whole, so that everyone is on the same page. So it's not like, hey, can we add 10 spearmen, like 10 low-level spearmen to this faction, because the answer to that would be no, because that's not what we do. So I will be sitting down with those people. We will be chatting a little bit about what we want to do and how we want to do it. But I will be looking for people in the very near future. But anyway, so the Orcs currently throw a shit ton at you. There are some factions like Glaurung who have a start position that will not have one. And Toll is not a horde faction. We need a script. And we do have a script for that. But Toll will start as a horde faction. Glaurung will be spawned in as a special event faction, and they will have some units that are available to Hangband as well, which they'll probably get awarded through scripts. But Toll and Gauderhoth, very temporary at the moment. Again, it's quite rough. But they will start as a horde faction, and they will start down here ready to siege Minas Tirith. Not that Minas Tirith, it's a different one. This is the original OG Minas Tirith on in an island in the middle of the River Sirion. So they will start here, and they will be kind of their job is to take Minas Tirith on the first turn. And if they don't, well, that might be the end of your campaign. You might be boned. So don't fail. What else do I have here? We do have that new UI that I mentioned that Alexios had put into the mod. I believe that's mostly concentrated on the dwarves at the moment. I was eager to get this out because I do have a busy week, so I wanted to have the stream this week so I could show you guys stuff. So the Edine's UI I don't think is in yet, but all that really cool Dwarven UI is there. And we do have some custom-made Elven stuff as well that's yet to come. So things are starting to get built out that way. Economies are a little bit crazy right now. That's something that I'll be looking for some more help to fine-tune in the near future. Some people have really strong economies, mostly due to their very high population. Fingolfin, I think Bayor has a population of 10,000. Obviously, that's too high. But the dwarves are a little bit more kind of middling right now. But that, obviously, we're going to change that. There's going to be a lot of big sweeping changes coming. Expect the dwarves to have pretty decent economies. And Doriath, for some reason, has really tiny populations, even in Menegroth. So they do struggle with their economy quite badly at the moment. But a lot of the pieces are there. So you can recruit, you can play games. We are missing rebel factions at the moment. Technically, they are done. I believe Alexios did have some trouble getting them implemented. He mentioned something went wrong when he sent me the files for the stream. But you will see these in the very, very near future. And eventually, every area is going to have its own like rebel units, right? Like, you won't have orcs down here in Ramlost, or you won't have, orcs down in... I can't remember the name of the place, like Taur Nufuin or whatever this area down here is. Taudim Duina, there we go. You won't have orcs living in here. You'll have like Avari rebels or whatever the local faction is. But this is technically done. It's just not available to be shown to you because there was some problem at the last minute. Let's see. Got hero units and things like that. So let me quit out here real quick, and we'll go and we'll jump into the Fingolfin campaign. There we go. So it does feel more like an alpha. I think everyone's got their win conditions specified as well. and their failure conditions, so that's ready to go, which is really cool. But certain people are going to have special bodyguards. Sometimes they will be unique, like brand new models available nowhere else, and sometimes they will be versions of existing ones. So we got Fingolfin here. Let's take him out. Poor 80-year-old man. Hopefully doesn't have a heart attack on the way out the front gate. And this will have, obviously this is a reskin of the Arima Arantar, but they do have extra HP. I believe they've got extra melee defense and some extra damage as well. And they do have big bonuses against Morgoth, who you guys can see. And that will only apply to the elephant script spawn version of Morgoth. It won't apply to his like general's bodyguard, but that's something that you can expect to see a lot of, is major characters having their own custom bodyguards. We're using EOP. We're using that for a very good reason. It gives us basically unlimited freedom to add as many units into the game as we want to. Their upkeep's extremely high, so we'll probably have to fix that at some point. But you get the idea there. I believe Morgoth has a custom bodyguard right now, but it's just like a generic bulldog unit. He will be getting something brand new, and that will be available in the testing patch if you guys want to help us test out our campaign and things like that. So you will see that in the extremely near future as well. I just didn't have time to add it in. Yeah, so it's really going to be whatever matches the theme best. The Arima Arantar are already established as Fingolfin's personal guard. They're his emissaries in the Hador faction and things like that. So that's why we use them. Whereas Morgoth will be getting a brand new unit, and that it'll be one of two things. I will discuss them probably at a later date, but it will play to different sort of aspects of Morgoth's personality, like his pride or his like conceit. Or his sadism and things like that, depending on what we end up picking. And you may end up with a bodyguard script as well, depending on our ability to implement that. Yeah, so what else do I have here? So one of the ways that you'll be able to, it's actually good that we're on an Noldor faction for doing this, one of the ways you'll be able to build out your characters and to kind of make things your own. I want it to feel in certain ways like, almost like a D&D campaign. Like, obviously there's established characters, Fingolfin, Morgoth, Húrin, Túrin, and things like that. But we will have building chains that are tied to certain traits and to certain ancillaries. Some of them will be exclusive with others. Others you'll have a little bit more freedom with. But for the Noldor in particular, it's based on the Pantheon of the Valar. So you'll have a building that you can dedicate to, say, one of the major players like Manwë or Varda or Ulmo and things like that. And you'll be able to get a very specific, sometimes you'll get a unit, an ancillary, a trait or whatever, that's like, you know, if I pick Manwë, maybe it's administrative. If I pick Tulkas, maybe it's more combat oriented. And you will have all these traits and ancillaries associated with these things, units as well. So this will be a way to gain some extra units into your pool. That will help you build out a character along a certain archetype that you want it to be. So if you are one of those players who likes to really kind of role play while you're playing these games, and you're like, well, I want to make a character that's like, you know, a righteous paladin kind of character, you will have the ability to make these building chains, and it will take you down certain paths, so there is a tech tree to it, and you'll be able to achieve that. If you really want to make an administrative general, and you don't want to wait, 10,000 turns, you want to like get it started right away for things to build up, whatever, will be a way to do that, to get some basic kind of starting traits to start you on your path towards becoming a really strong administrator. So, as I said, you'll have to basically pick a major Valar, and then you'll have like lesser Valar. So you have the major players. We've divided them up into major players like Manwë, Varda, etc. And then you'll have lesser players like Nienna, things like that. Maybe even Osse. We might expand it to the more powerful Maiar servants as well. And you'll pick that major path, and then you'll have a minor path with a few other options on the table for you. So that's pretty cool. Some of them have already been implemented. I think the buildings themselves need to be brought in, but I do have some ancillaries that I've been working on, such as like a priestess of like Nienna that does certain things. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. So that's pretty cool. Yes, currently not all settlements are are properly assigned. Obviously, we saw that earlier. But there is a big thing that I want to talk to you guys about. Let's see, we got 9 people in here. Perfect. This is a good time to talk about it. Escalation sieges. This is a unique kind of system to us, as far as I'm aware. And basically what that is that I always found it very disappointing if I would go and, take Minas Tirith in 3rd Age in a single turn. It's a massive city, and I take it by storm in a single battle, and that kind of never sit terribly right with me. So escalation sieges are going to break up various parts of a settlement into different tiles. Each one of those is going to have like a garrison script associated with it, so it will always be a struggle, always be a battle to take it. But you can see an example of that right here. We will have Bayor coming to both single and multiplayer, and that's being made by WK, who does legendary work. So Bayor itself will have its name changed. It will be like the walls of Bayor or the battlements of Bayor or whatever. And that will be like the first half of the city, essentially. So you'll be taking like the walls and like the market and things like that. And then there will be an area outside of the playable area that's like a keep and stuff on the hill that you won't be able to access immediately. You will be able to attack that on the following turn. And we've set up the map here so that you kind of need to do them in sequence. Like if you're coming through here as Morgoth, you're going to have to hit Bayor first. So you can't just skip right to the Garden of the High King. And then the Garden of the High King will be the keep. And then behind you, you'll see like ruins of the area that you've already conquered. That hopefully won't get in the way too much of your deployment and things like that. So that when you take these major cities, Gondolin, Angband, etc., etc., it is going to feel a little bit more epic that way. Yeah, so it's a really exciting system. Bayor, I think, is going to be the first one that you guys see. We have previewed it a little bit on the Discord, and you should, now that you know that, if you go and check it out on the Discord, you'll see a very clear delineation. There's like a bridge, basically, between the two. And so you'll have to take the walls, and then you take the Garden of the High King. So there's 2 there. And that's why over here, Angband is one of the few places that kind of merits having a 3rd tile. The only other one that's like that is, where is it? It's Gondolin. Yeah, these guys are still out here from our preview, I believe, aura farming in front of the city of Gondolin. But you can see the walls of Tumladen, the Great Market of Gondolin. If you guys have read the Fall of Gondolin, you'll recognize the Great Market. It was a site of a big battle during the siege. And then the Tower of the King, where everything kind of wraps up, and that's, well, no spoilers, but it collapses and the city is taken. You'll have the same thing over here. So you have the gates. You'll struggle for the gates. The Vaults of Iron. I have a really cool concept for this. Basically be a large underground volcanic cavern. And then you'll have the Throne of Morgoth, which will have its own battlements and things like that. And that's when you'll have truly taken everything. And this is actually where Morgoth is hanging out. So you got 2 cities here, and that's actually their capital. So when you get the Silmarillion, you're going to have to fight your way into Thangoragrim. Or you're going to have to fight your way into Bayor, and every single one of these will have a garrison script associated with it. So that, because the AI is stupid, we all know this, we all recognize this, if they leave these places lightly defended, then you're not going to rob yourself of an experience by attacking at an opportune moment when it's not as heavily defended as it could be. So you will get garrison scripts. They will be tough units. They will have a lot of chevrons, which actually makes a huge difference. But yeah, that's the experience we're trying to craft, where when you're destroying or taking or sieging these legendary cities and areas, that it feels suitably amazing. Because taking Angband in one siege, when like the whole mountain range, like it's supposedly extends into the whole mountain range, all of the Iron Mountains, would be really disappointing. So they will be custom settlements. They won't be generic, although currently they are because we're not finished. But they will be custom settlements, garrison scripts, all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the features I think that I'm most excited about. Yeah, I hope you guys are looking forward to it as well. It's so far the implementation, like all the bare bones of it, is like kind of there. Obviously, we have the separate tiles and things like that. We will see how that works out. I guess if you want to conceptualize it in terms of things that have already been done, it's kind of like the Tharbads in DAC, but they're more linked together, especially visually. There's storytelling. Once you're sieging the Garden of the High King, the walls of Bayor will lie in ruins behind you. So they're very much connected. And as I understand, there is a new way to do this through EOP, which will free up some tiles, where basically you can have multiple cities that are all kind of part of the same tile. So this is very much like possible, and we've even got some new kind of technical advancements that make it even more doable, and will allow us to expand the map. I think we'll end up with another 6 cities or something like that, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there are some areas that have like large kind of open spaces, so we'll be able to fill in the gaps there a little bit. Yeah, where else are we at? Many people have asked, and I'm sure people are going to be curious. Will you be able to play minor factions like Glaurung, or Nandungortheb we have down here, or the Avari down in Tower and Luinath in the extreme south, just like way down here. Yeah, this whole area. You will not. So we do not have plans to have minor factions like that be playable. You will be able to, and that includes like Bayor and Hador, who we showed off earlier. You will have access to their units and be able to interact with them, whether it's via script or whatever. But you will not currently be playing with them. You will be playing as the major characters. So the Easterlings, Angband, the various houses of the Noldor, even the Green Elves, both holds of the Dwarves will be available for play. But those minor factions, they will still be present. They will still be a nuisance, especially Glaurung for Finarfin. He will show up for like a climactic battle at some point to try and take the city of Nargothrond. But we do not currently have plans to have them all be playable at the moment. But like I said, you'll still feel their presence, and you will still be able to gain access to them. Mithrim is another one. They will be tightly bound to Fingolfin, so you'll be able to recruit a whole bunch of their units. And you can see them hanging out over here. The AI, as I understand it, in the new version of EOP, is a lot more... it's a lot less useless. It's not so much of a ball and chain. They are willing to come to your defense and be a little bit more aggressive and actually help you out, instead of just sitting next to you and slowly deteriorating relations over time that you have to keep in check with the script. That is what I have been told by people who would know such things. So these alliances will actually be more meaningful because these guys are willing to come and help you. So if you've got, say, Baradithal, I'm sure we'll use the Crusade mechanic a lot for Morgoth. If there's like a Crusade at Baradithal, you can reasonably expect Mithrim and any other allies, Finarfin and things like that, you can see that you start allied with, to come to your aid. So that will be a hard one to kind of balance a little bit. So it may end up being that, despite my insistence to the contrary of us trying to cut down stack spam, that because the AI is willing to defend its allies a lot more, and so many people start allied, that either we break up the blocks, or we keep everyone and go like very lore lore faithful, but then we have to increase the amount of pressure that Angband can put on that alliance. That again will be something to be decided amongst the testers. If you guys are interested in having a say in how this progresses, please do come and give us a hand. I need dedicated single player people. I have lots of multiplayer people. We have a very core crew we've had for ages, but I need single player people. Yes. So moving on now, unless we have any other questions. I think we've had some little chit chat here. When will the new patch come out? Oh, I hate that question. It'll come out when it's ready. I have a team of volunteers. We all work. We all have jobs, lives, etc. We have made huge strides, and I and the team have been working our butts off over the last little while. In the last week, I think we've made more progress than we have in months. And it's going to be that way, right? Like, we're going to have, a week where a year happens, and then a year where a week happens. So I don't have an answer to that question. I probably almost never will, unless I make an announcement, like, independently. And that you can bet, will come after a lot of discussion with the team about what we can reasonably accomplish in an amount of time. So that I don't know. I won't be able to answer that kind of question. But think about some other stuff. Again, we will be having a question period at the end of this. So if you want something answered in depth that I can't just answer in a couple of sentences, hold on to that for the end, or you can just ask some simple stuff in the chat now. But anyway, moving on now. We do, in the current build that's available to everybody, the last publicly available builds, have a ton of campaign units that will be going away. Again, pursuant to our kind of changes to multiplayer, where we're trying to keep everything a lot more focused and like have factions have very clearly contoured strengths and weaknesses. We are trimming back the amount of campaign units that we have currently that are available. So some of the things that you may be used to in like the campaign mode for multiplayer will be going away. But we are adding new stuff in as a result of that, but in a little bit more of a focused way. Let me talk a little bit about that. How many people do we have in here right now? Yeah, I think we've got some time. Yeah, it's only about 1 o'clock. So let me talk a little bit about what that's going to look like. So we are leaning very heavily into sub-factions. And Angband, I think, is the one that I have fleshed out the most. This is going to have a lot of like custom like characters and personalities, all with their own custom settlements and military philosophies and backstories that are just tied to them and the areas that they live in. And so far, it's pretty cohesive. We've had good feedback from the internal testing people we've talked to about it. So let's give you an example here. Angband is going to have these little settlements here be renamed. Obviously, they'll have these 3 things here to represent like the main complex of Thangorodrim, but they will also have these kind of outlying settlements. These are going to change in name. One of them is going to be called the Adumbral Tangle. So it's a large, thorny area that's kind of like a game reserve, where prisoners are sent who are no longer of any use to be hunted for sport by the overseer and the forces who inhabit the area, who rely quite heavily on like wargs and hunting packs and things like that. You will have access to some high-tier orcs here, but they are not going to kind of tread on the feet of the existing Angband roster. And this is what I mean by we're trying to do it in a little bit more of a focused way. So you're going to have some actual like high-tier things, whereas Angband they have some high tiers, but they're just kind of okay, and they've got a lot of like mid and like low-tier units and things that are just kind of like they make up for the lack of quality with lots of bodies. The Hordes of the Adumbral Tangle will be a little bit different from that. They will be smaller, medium armored, and using some weapon types that Angband doesn't really have too much of, and they'll also have a lot of wargs and things like that. It will be led by a character that we made called Akbolumal, the Houndmaster. You'll learn lots and lots about him, and he will be connected to Morgoth through descriptions and traits. I'll just say this right now. I'm a huge fan of FromSoft games and their very minimalist storytelling. So you will find items and ancillaries that will tell you about the stories and the relationships between all of these characters. But it won't be just kind of thrown in your face and done overtly. You will have to kind of look around and explore. And as you defeat these characters, or you play as Angband, you go through the ancillaries and stuff, you will be rewarded with little tidbits of lore for doing that. So if you want story, it's there. You are going to have to look for it a little bit. And that's done in 2 ways. 1, because I really respect that as an approach. And 2, because the Silmarillion is a very established narrative. I don't want to just like... Everyone knows, more or less how the Silmarillion is. I don't want to just throw a bunch of like lore you've never heard of in your face, which can maybe pull you out of the experience that you're looking to have. So we'll be there in small ways. And if you choose to ignore it and you just want to go with like the general Silmarillion storyline, that's all you care to know about, that's the option you have. If you want to look around, there will be some rewards for that a little bit. Let's see. One of the other factions we'll have will be the Frozen Jail, which I think will be over here. It'll be... So in general, I'm leaning into Angband as like the underworld, right? The literal name in Sindarin for Angband is Iron Hell. So we're going to have a place of like frozen torment, sort of similar to like Cocytus from like Dante, where Lucifer is kept in a lake of ice kind of thing. So we will have that theme of like that frozen hell, and the Frozen Jail will be where people are sent to be exiled and tormented who particularly displease Morgoth. It will be overseen by Javerzamar of the Hollow Heart, and he's got his own little thing, little blurbs and stuff like that ties him to Morgoth, with like ties of like servitude and like dark magic and things like that. And his roster will be a lot lighter, themed around like snow, lots of bonuses in snow. Orcs generally get bonuses in snow when they're playing for Angband, so that'll be a place for that to actually be activated. So it has that like practical gameplay purpose, but it also kind of fleshes things out a little bit and gives you something to look forward to that maybe you wouldn't be expecting. So that's pretty cool. Another example would be, so once, let's say if you're Ulfang or your Angband or something like that, you manage to take over Dorloman, as they do in the story. So down in here, there will be a sub-faction essentially of Easterlings called Brada's Brutes, to represent like the Easterling military occupation of the area. They're sort of themed around that and Brada and his role in the area during like post Nir Nayeth, once the League of Angband had been broken and things like that. So instead of just adding whatever we feel like and just like letting our creativity go nuts, which is kind of what we were doing before, where rosters ended up getting really bloated and people just had a little bit of everything. Even, you know, Finarfin doesn't have a lot of cavalry. In fact, they have almost none, but they ended up with a bunch of cavalry from us doing that. We are leaning more into that kind of sub-faction thing, tying it more to the lore, telling little stories through ancillaries and through sub-factions and the units and the overseers who, or the like generals and stuff like that who command them. So it's a little bit more focused in that way. So you will be losing some of those units, but you are gaining something at the same time. It's just going to be a little bit different. So hopefully that's not too disappointing for people. There will still be tons and tons of mercenaries. We don't currently have them implemented yet, but because of the limitations of the Iron recruitment system, obviously that can be a big pain in the ass, especially for the AI and like pressure and things like that. Can maybe lead them to being like passive or weak and things like that. So the way that we're going to supplement that is with a ton of AOR. Like an AOR settlement that doesn't have iron might still be able to get its AOR units. So let's say Fingolfin took the Daggerlord here, and it's just like a minor settlement. But because Fingon kept watch with a lot of like light horse archers, and they were able to drive Glaurung back when he prematurely revealed himself before the Dagor Bragalach, then maybe you'll be able to have access to them here, even though it's not an iron settlement. Things like that. So there's gonna be a ton of room for exploration, not just through like storytelling and ancillaries, but progression paths, right? For I expand here, I get this mercenary. This mercenary helps me fight enemies in the local area. Things like that. So we'll be very like carefully considered. Let me give you an example of that that I have actually spent a lot of time thinking about. So we have Boar hanging out over here. So we have the Green Elves, right? Let's say you're the Green Elves and you want to expand against the dwarves up here. But the Green Elves don't have a ton of AP, they don't have amazing infantry, and their missiles are somewhat thwarted by the presence of like heavily armored units in the area. So if they want to be able to like credibly and more easily expand into the dwarves here, let's say they got to go over to Dorlost, and in Dorlost they managed to get a hold of some Avari Macemen, or maybe an Avari unit that has armor piercing, and then that can help them then progress into this area. So it's forcing you to kind of go on a bit of a journey in order to circle back and go to where you actually want to go. But hopefully we can do that without making it tedious. It's not like, you know, go find your MacGuffin, and on the way you have to find 3 more MacGuffins to find your MacGuffin. Like, obviously I don't want to do that. That's a mistake, and it really does break up pacing. But that's just an example. That doesn't have to be the exact implementation of it. We have to go over here in order to go over here. But that's kind of what we're looking for. Like, almost a tech tree in terms of where you decide to expand and what mercenaries that you deliberately give yourself access to. Not only does that give you some really interesting like tactical options and make each campaign a little bit different, but it also helps the AI as well, who has a lot of trouble, who could have a lot of trouble with the iron system and only having a limited recruitment. And it also gives you a reason to explore and to just get out there, because you never know, like, am I going to go find some brand new unit that I never even thought existed because it's not available in campaign mode or multiplayer, and because I went over here, I was rewarded with that, right? Or you'll be rewarded with like story and ancillaries and things like that, just to keep you interested and to make your campaigns feel different. Because ultimately, what we're trying to build is, if you may permit me to wax poetic for a little bit here, we want to build something that's a little bit timeless, right? The Silmarillion itself, the narrative, Tolkien, all of that is very timeless. So we're trying to build in systems that are going to help you play this game like when you're 70 and suffering from dementia in the retirement home. But you've, you know, forgotten your mother's face, but you still remember the fun times you had in Silmarillion, and you're still wanting to play that. So that's the goal, is to just make this cohesive web of things that just keeps you playing for a long time and lets you have different experiences. Anyway, even if you're playing the same faction, like maybe you play the Green Elves 10 times and it's different every time. Let's see. Yes, we have begun implementing escalation sieges. I talked a little bit about that. Filling out lore and adding character and sub-faction regions. I think that's that's pretty much everything that I can talk about on campaign, unless you guys have some very specific questions. We can transition into that question period. I will probably leave that open for a good 10 or 15 minutes. If you guys want to ask me some questions about this on stream, or if you want to come and find me on Discord, I'm usually available. It is a busy week, so I'll probably get back to you within 2 to 3 business days. Depending on the complexity of what you're asking, I may have to talk to people, make inquiries, etc. But I will drop a little link into the Discord here while we wait for some questions to materialize. And if you guys are interested in getting involved with the project, either as a developer, we're particularly looking for scripters. Always happy to have new model people. Anybody who can do animations, rigging, and things like that, always happy to have you. But if you just want to test and you want to get involved in the process and like chat with us about kind of what we want to do and how we want to do it and how we might achieve those goals, please do drop by. Let me find a little permanent link here that I can give you guys whilst we wait for some questions to happen. I think I have a link down in my description here, so let's try that. But other than that, yeah, I don't think there's anything else to add. We do need to obviously start tying in like settlements and generic stuff. I am talking to some of the DAC people to see if maybe we can borrow some of their generic stuff and maybe some of their strat models for villages and things like that, so we don't just have the generic Medieval 2 stuff. We do, I think, have some Elven things here. Why don't we take a look? I don't know what that set plan retreat route is. Oh, you can plan retreat routes. There you go. So you don't retreat in a random area. That's a cool thing that EOP can do for you. Let's see if this is actually an Elven settlement. I think it might be. Some of them I think are done. Oh, interesting. I don't think we clicked on the right area. Oh yeah, here it is. Grab you guys that link. Okay, it's looking like maybe we don't have too many questions here. So I will probably wrap it up there. Yeah, let me just quickly post that link and then see if we can view the battle map here and actually see this settlement properly. And then, yeah, if you guys want to follow up with anything that you saw on the stream, or if you guys want to get involved, then that'll be the way to do it. Oh, there you go. So it is a generic kind of settlement. So that is actually implemented. It's not going to be the case for every single one of them, but yeah, the campaign is in a much, much more playable state, even if some of the stuff is so far just fairly generic. Alright. There you go. There's the Discord thing. That should work. If you guys want to come and join us and say hello, yeah, that'll take you over to Silmarillion Total War. But yeah, I have been JMonster. I'm the lead developer of the mod. I mostly focus on multiplayer and like system design and just sort of generally designing things. The Iron recruitment system is my little baby. But I do have lots that I'm still trying to learn about practical implementations for campaign. I hope you guys have enjoyed this so far, and I suppose I will see you again soon. Fairly soon. Oh yeah, you know what? I will show you guys the map, because I do have a slight explanation for some stuff. namely our Halloween event, which I never ended up being able to get together. Lots of assets were unfortunately lost. One of our guys who was making stuff was he had his computer destroyed, so I'm still trying to get those back. And then this map wasn't working, but now, thanks to WK's wonderful wizardry, it actually is. So let me show you one of the first sieges that we have here. This was actually made by Eclipse. I designed the layout of it, and Eclipse made it in Blender, which is something cool that I'm also learning how to make. I'm currently working on the Hill of Himring, so that will be an Escalation siege. And I will be working on sort of the main kind of node for that. That'll be like the main settlement. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. It's very Halloween themed, so if you're wondering why there's lots of autumn colors and pumpkins and things like that, we did actually make this for a Halloween event. But this will be available to everybody for multiplayer. If people really like it, we could implement it in campaign. But it's quite different, and it's kind of, I guess, evocative of the approach that we try to take to the mod overall. So we try to make things familiar but still like meaningfully different. So hopefully it doesn't crash on me, because I had issues with that yesterday. Bah! There we go. So this has several approaches to it. It is not like a strongly walled settlement. This is something that is built around like mobile and aggressive defense. So you're going to see that with like very big gulfs between where people spawn, where attackers spawn, and where the defenders are able to deploy. They'll mostly be behind the walls, but if you're playing with, say, Glaurung, who we saw earlier, lots of chariots, lots of abilities to be aggressive, this is a map that can be very useful for that. So you got a lot of bridges here, some horrible entrails and skulls hanging above them, and you're going to have 2 bridges that are available in the early level before you commit to a path. And once you do that, you do get separated a little bit from your friends and your allies. We have lots of little custom lighting effects here, a lot of pieces that we converted over from BFME that are actually available in our battle editor as well. So you can build like scenario maps and stuff using them. Actual sieges are a bit harder, but the first line of defense are these little flimsy wooden walls here that are quite easy to get through. And you'll have these big kind of spider caverns and stuff like that, because it is like a spider themed map, and there'll be lots of reasons that you'll understand why that is if I can get the Halloween event going this fall. Some really cool stuff here. Also really nice lighting by Eclipse. You can see lots of fall related things, lots of fallen leaves and things like that. But these 2 main paths here, after you commit to one, they're both going to be kind of a backdoor area all the way up to the deployment zone, which you can find here, where there's a horrible bloody feast going on. Lots of pumpkins and discarded flesh and things like that. So there's those 2 main paths. They each go through a different kind of cave. There'll be lots of big wide open kind of chokes and things like that for people to fight over. Up here it's a little bit different. Once you take this area, there's a little impassable place that you can station some missile units. So if there's any defenders down in here, you will be able to rain down hell and death upon them. And then 2 smaller choke points, obviously a little bit smaller than the one we saw over there. But I think if you were to put them together, they'd be about the same size. So some advantages and disadvantages for both sides as you're moving through there. There's a beautiful little cavern here that Eclipse has made, lit by these eerie green lights, and that leads to the first level of wall here. And that's actually the only wall. But out beyond that, there's lots of little areas in the city that you can move through. There's bridges. I believe this bridge is passable, so you can go across it. You can also go under it. Right here, there's like lots of like hanged bodies and gibbets and things like that, and that's going to lead direct up into this area. But of course, there's lots of things that you got to deal with. There's wide open areas here where troops can be stationed. These large outcroppings and things like that that you can station missile troops on, artillery, especially indirect units. Urush, abominations for Nand and Gortheb are great up here. This is actually a really good map to play Orcish factions defensively on. If you're playing with Nan and Glaurung, they've got a lot of mobility options, a lot of indirect fire that can be really, really brutal as people move through this kind of tangled, webby maze of buildings and things like that. But yeah, once you move through there, you can either go left up the cliff or into this kind of flatter area. I believe, yes, you can lead up to here, and then a lot of things will then snake back towards this little center area. So there's lots of ways to like move through here. It's like difficult to play very statically because there's so many ways that people can move through, especially the attackers. There's these multiple lanes of attack, and there's at least 1, 2, 3 major lanes. Oh, 4 on this side. So it does favor very much a more fluid and aggressive, mobile kind of defense. There's certain factions this will be really cool for, and then you know a map like Bayor, which unfortunately I can't show you yet, but it is on our Discord, so if you want to go check it out there. That will be your more traditional kind of siege map where you can dig in behind battlements and slog it out, basically using the like choke points and geography to leverage the high damage, high longevity, and natural talent for war of like Noldor and things like that. Whereas this is going to be something else that's something that's balanced around more lighter factions and mobility and things like that. And catching people at unawares, and like this is a great place for you to have cavalry, for example, cavalry, chariots, dragons, things like that. And all of these have like pathfinding, so they will block missiles. So you've got options for like hiding. It's not just park a bunch of missile units in the back here and rain hellfire on people. So it's pretty interesting. Should have lots of fun little choices and like different ways to address it with different factions and different teams. And yeah, this is the Weaving Dark. And we'll learn a little bit more about it. It's got backstory and stuff that I've written for it. Closer to the Halloween event, hopefully I can get that going on. If I can't, then maybe I'll look at just releasing a short story that describes the adventures of people and how they end up here and how it ends up being. We might not get a video for it, but I'll do my best on that. Either way, there will be some custom story and stuff like that for you guys to enjoy. I think that should be pretty much it for the stream then. We've been going at it for like 3 hours now. I'm certainly ready for a break. Anyway, I've been Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys enjoy this. Hope you're excited. I hope to see some of you onto the Discord, and potentially even working with some of you in the near future. But yeah, that's it for me. Hope you guys